Hey everybody, welcome to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress. Before we get started, a couple show notes. You did it. You helped me get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and that means I will be live chatting very soon. Just let me get up to speed and understand all the particulars. I'm dressing my living room to be an appropriate set, and I'm happy to be taking questions from the Word Balloon audience, as I've promised for years. We'll finally do some Word Balloon Town Hall meetings, talk about some of the new stuff that's out there now, the new CW shows and the like. So the YouTube channel is under Word Balloon at YouTube. Please come and subscribe if you haven't already and join the conversation. And very shortly, we'll be doing some great YouTube chats. Questions about the show, including book reviews, send them to me via email, john@wordballoon.com. Okay, I know commercials stink. I thank you for listening to these and not fast-forwarding them. One more and we'll start the show. Thanks a lot, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Great conversation coming up with Robert Meyer Burnett. Now, you know I'm a big fan of Rob's, going back to his 1999 directorial debut with Free Enterprise. Rob was a producer on Agent Cody Banks. He also directed several episodes of Femme Fatales, and is currently the producer, co-producer, and editor on a film called Tango Shalom, which features the last performances of Joe Bologna and Renee Taylor, a great couple, wonderful character actors, and I believe the parents of Rob's co-producer and director. All that said, Rob is here because I have been dying to hear his opinions on several things. This is a spoiler-heavy conversation. We are going to spoil Ad Astra, we are going to spoil Joker, and we're also going to, unfortunately, shake our fists at Star Trek Discovery and shrug about Star Trek Picard. And then in the meantime, the short treks are underway. I've seen the first two. The second one aired dropped last night, I should say, and it's available for you if you have CBS All Access. I don't know what to say, man. But the good news is Rob does, and we discuss all these subjects and more on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your continued support via Patreon. It is the start of October, and, I guess we're about a third of the way already of October. Can you believe it? Good Lord. 2020 coming up in just a few weeks. Holy cow. All that said, though, thank you very much for your support, League, through Patreon. If you like what you hear at Word Balloon, it's free. It'll always be free. But if you want to help out the cause, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. Click on the Patreon ad. You can subscribe to Word Balloon. Is Word Balloon worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth the price of a comic book a month? I hope so. I try to bring you some interesting pop culture conversations like the ones we're going to have with Rob today, and try to entertain you in the process. So patreon.com/wordballoon, or click on the Patreon ad at wordballoon.com. But thank you greatly for your help and support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics, another group supporting Word Balloon with their sponsorship. Hey, great genre-bending books, unbelievable creators. You know these names and you trust these names when you see Marguerite Bennett's name, or Cullen Bunn, or good friends like Tim Seeley and Phil Hester. Great stuff, man. Garth Ennis, of course. Stephanie Phillips. Chris Sabella, to name a few. Really interesting writers and artists. Great graphic design. Genre-bending stories that will interest and shock you. Hence, Aftershock. Don't take my word for it. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on their books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Okay. So here we go with Rob. A great conversation. I'll tell you what. We got about 25 minutes of content before we get to the spoilers. So look on your iPhone or your MP3 player and time check right now, because for the first 25 minutes, Rob and I just talk about things in general. We compliment each other. As I say in the conversation, I really respect Rob, and we have similar career paths, despite not having similar careers. He being someone of the film and television world, me being of the radio broadcast world. And we get to do cool things online that expand our brand and give us opportunities we haven't had before. He talks about several of those in those first 25 minutes. Then we get into very spoiler-heavy conversations about Ad Astra, Joker, the Star Trek Discovery in general. Not too much about this third season coming up, but a little bit about the first short trek Q&A, which featured Rebecca Romaine once again as Captain Pike's number one, and Ethan Peck as a young Mr. Spock stuck in a turbo lift. You'd think that would be a great opportunity for some deep characterization. We get characterization. I don't know how deep it is, and frankly, I found it very disappointing, especially given that Michael Chabon, one of the best writers in genre fiction, and I thought a guy that's really going to bring a shot in the arm of positivity to the Star Trek franchise in its current inception. But that said, I didn't like it. And I'll tell you something, the trouble with Edward, the second short trek, which dropped Thursday evening as I'm putting this together, Thursday evening before I started, watched that short trek. Woof. Man, I cannot wait to hear some of my friends that are such hardcore Star Trek fans react to The Trouble with Edward. It's a Tribbles short trek with H. John Benjamin. And that's a shame because I'm a big fan of his, all of his work. And but this, not so hot. What can I say? But anyway, without further ado, let me present my conversation with Robert Meyer Burnett now on Word Balloon. It's the Vermeer of verisimilitude. Robert Meyer Burnett.
John, first of all, I have to say thank you for the support of my own YouTube channel. I thank you, and I've been a fan of yours for many years. Every time you show up in a live chat or anything, I'm just excited that you're paying attention, and I feel honored when you're there.
Oh, it's really nice, man. I genuinely enjoy what you do. You know that, and I enjoy your opinions. And no, you're doing a great job, man. It's been fun. God, I started watching you when I had this ankle injury, and I was in the hospital and stuff. And
how is that now?
It's almost there, man. I blew off New York because of the walking, and it stretches my ankle where the infection was its deepest, and they had to cut it out and everything. Very gross.
Oh man,
got me like a fish, as Jimmy Stewart says to John Wayne in The Shootist. I got you like a fish.
Nice reference.
I know who I'm talking to, but yeah, man. No, but I'm like 95% there, and I just knew all the walking in New York would just kind of prolong it and everything. So I'm like, all right, I'll take this New York off. Of course, I take this New York off. Although I don't know if I would have walked to the Garden from the Javits Center the way they've got seats New York Comic Con laid out these days. It really is a pain in the ass, and I mean, it takes you a half hour to walk between the Javits and the Garden and stuff. So that's like 60 minutes off the floor in addition to whatever panel you're going to at the Garden.
It was my first, actually my 31st San Diego Comic-Con this year.
That's great.
And I've never been to New York Comic-Con. I was supposed to go a couple years ago with John Schnepp and Amy Dallin. And I couldn't go. I've always wanted to go. And my hometown, the Emerald City Comic-Con, not that they should invite me, but I'm like, I can't believe I've never been one of my dreams was to take a movie to the Seattle International Film Festival that I grew up going to. And in 2009, when The Hills Run Red came out, the world premiere was, I produced it, I developed it. It took us 3 years to make it. And it had its world premiere at the Seattle International Film Festival.
Wow.
And I always thought, well, maybe one day the Emerald City Comic-Con would invite me.
Oh, man. I wish I knew
I could have panels. I mean, as a founding member of Starship SmackDown at San Diego in 2002, I'm like, how have I never been invited to my own hometown Comic-Con, which didn't even exist when I started going to San Diego?
Sure. No, my buddy Jimmy DeMonakis co-created it, if he didn't create it himself, and they sold it to Reed. So, it's run by New York Comic-Con and C2E2. It's those people that run Emerald City now and have for a couple of years. Otherwise, I'd be like, oh, I wish I knew them, man, because I would hook you up with Jim in a heartbeat. He's a great guy. And,
well, it's just so funny. I mean, my own hometown.
I hear you. Well, that's what I'm saying, man. Sometimes they don't know the connection. Terrificon, this Connecticut show that I went to in August, comic book writer David Walker is from Connecticut. And I told him about it at Rose City in Portland. And he's like, oh, that's right by my hometown at Mohegan Sun Casino. I'm like,
right.
David, I know the guy who runs it. He would love to have you. Please come. And actually, David and my buddy Sanford Green, they have an image series called Bitter Root that Ryan Coogler is producing and hopefully going to make into a series.
I read that.
There you go.
Which is very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, and I you see, Rob, again, I feel this kinship with you because we have friends in the business that are doing wonderful things, and God bless them. And I have broadcast friends like that, and, you know, my comic creator buddies like Rucka and Bendis are having wonderful years. Rucka, certainly, with Stumptown, and also he has a Charlize Theron movie coming out on Netflix next year based on his Image comic, The Old Guard, or Oni. Maybe it was Oni. But, you know.
It's funny, with Stumptown, the director I've been working with for 3 years on this movie that I'm producing and have been editing,
Tango Shalom.
He's the his childhood friend, his best friend in the world, is producing Stumptown.
There you go.
And
that's great, you know.
I love it when people I know are successful. I've always been of the opinion that a high tide rises all ships, or raises all ships. And what's funny is I've been up, I've been down. I'm always doing something. You know, I'm always doing something creative. And what's really interesting is that no one else's success ever interferes with what I'm doing.
I hear you.
And I you know, Hollywood people can be jealous, or I've really been a fan of watching all my friends do cool stuff.
Yeah.
And you can never go wrong with that.
Well, and we run our own races, and as I've heard you talk about on your YouTube shows, and I say the same thing, like, the podcast to me is a huge success, and it's a win. I've got my audience, I've got my group that follows me and is interested in what I present and everything, and I get opportunities from it that I never would have gotten from traditional radio and the various traditional radio jobs. So my buddy Mike Greenberg, who's kicking ass at ESPN, and my buddy Judd Surratt, who's the voice of the Boston Bruins, I'm thrilled for them. But it's like Jesse Owens always said, run your own race, man. And, you know, that's the important thing is, you know, don't worry about the guy in the next lane. Just do your own thing. And, yeah, I mean, again, we get these victories, and I know you're experiencing them as well with Tango Shalom. I know you got a big secret project coming up as well, and congratulations when you're able to talk about it. I hope you'll come back and talk about it, you know. So,
well, I'll tell you something that's really, really interesting. So back in 2017, after I was involved with the fan film Axnar project that was famously sued by CBS, well, I had to leave that project after Alec Peters left California, and he wanted to do these 2 15-minute movies, and I said, you know, we've already done that. Unless we're going to do some kind of narrative feature or narrative films, why just recreate what we did? So I resigned.
Yes. After
I resigned, a buddy of mine, a friend of mine, who is a Green Beret, ex-Green Beret, 18 Delta, and he's a medic. He's now an ER doctor. And for years, he has been teaching a course called Crisis Medicine Tactical Casualty Care. And basically what it was, it's pre-hospital care for people that are victims of active violent events, whether it's an active shooter, a building collapse, an explosion. He was basically teaching both EMTs and civilians, how can you keep people alive if this happens?
Okay.
He calls me up and he goes, my wife does not, now that we have a teenage daughter, does not want me going to, like, Syria in the middle of a civil war and teaching this class. Can you, you know, bring your Hollywood acumen and film me teaching this course, and we'll turn it into a video series? And I said, yeah, man, cool, let's do that. I knew nothing about what he did. I had no clue.
Sure.
So I watch a video that he sends me, and then I go to Portland. He lives in Portland. He's an ER doctor in Portland. And I go, you have to teach me, pretend I'm your audience, teach me a course. And he's very witty, and his humor is very dry, and I've known him since elementary school, basically. And I said, this is awesome. And I go, we should shoot this. Now you see these master classes. I mean, everybody's teaching.
Absolutely.
Master class is a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, 2 years ago, it wasn't as much of a big deal. So I was like, let's do it we'll shoot it. I'm like, we'll shoot it like a movie. I want a 4-camera shoot. We'll shoot it on a soundstage. I designed these set pieces for him, and he had no experience with Hollywood production, none. And so I brought in that, and it was very funny because he says, in the military, we have a plan, we have a backup plan, we have an emergency plan, and when that goes foobar, we have a 4th plan. and I was like, dude, you have to understand, I'm hiring these people for production. He's like, this seems a little loosey-goosey to me. And I said, no. Our first day of shooting, we're on a sound stage. We're going to shoot for 3 days. I go, you have to understand, it's 6 a.m. at call time. They're going to bring all the set pieces that I've designed. The camera crew is going to show up. The sound guy is going to show up. He's like, I don't know, man. Like he thought, I think you're not being, I just don't understand. I go, Mike, trust me. 5:59 in Portland, right? On the sound stage we've rented. 5:59, like 3 trucks blaze in. The guys who've made these set pieces that I designed, the sound guy and the camera dudes show up. And by 6 a.m., they throw up. The studio we were shooting at, nobody was there. It seemed like it was totally empty.
Okay.
At 6 a.m., the load-in door just comes right up. and as the dudes are pulling in, and everybody starts unloading their equipment and everything, and Mike was not there yet. His wife was there, who's basically the producer.
Okay.
She's looking at me. She's going, well, how is this happening? Like, this is 6 o'clock on the nose. And I'm like, this is Hollywood. For everything that you hear about Hollywood, one of the greatest things you will ever see is Hollywood production.
Sure.
Because time is money. Every second costs money. And when she's watching all this, and I'm just standing there, and she's like, how did you know this was going to happen? I'm like, because I worked in production for almost 30 years. This is how it always happens. You hire people, you get them to do what they do. You approve them, and they do it. And the only reason they continue to work is because they show up exactly on time and they do the job you're paying them for. Amazing, right? Although not. So what was really cool was we spent 8 days shooting this series, and I worked with local Portland PD and also SWAT.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was amazing. So crisis medicine, tactical casualty care, this thing, I shot it. It took me a year to edit. It's a total of 50 hours of material. If you go to the website, Crisis Medicine, I think it's crisis-medicine, you can take the course. It just got accredited.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic, man.
So this medical series that I knew nothing about medicine. I just brought my Hollywood filmmaking acumen to one of my oldest friends in the world, who is now an ER doctor, a former Green Beret medic, and he wanted to do this, and I'm like, here's how we should do it. And it's now an accredited course, and it's very funny. This was not something I thought would ever happen. Like, I had no inkling that I was ever going to do this. But because he asked me, I'm like, we could make this. Let's make this. It'll be really cool. And lo and behold, it turned out to be cool. I'd never done this before, and I learned more. Let me just tell you, if I was ever in a civil uprising or an active shooter event,
yes,
I could save lives.
That's fantastic. You can swap stories now with Greg Rucka, who was a former EMT. So, so that's terrific, man. And you told me. Go ahead.
Rucka should actually take the course now that it's going to be accredited, and he can have his 2 years of continuing education watching the work I've done.
That's fantastic. Is it affiliated with any schools? Or can they use it? I mean, how does that work when it's accredited?
Well, I think so. From what I understand, and by the way, I understand very little about this world, but apparently, when you are an EMT or a police officer, or you need to do every 2 years continuing education. Sure. So crisis medicine has now been accredited, and then one of the first things I finished was a 90-minute program on wound ballistics. Sure. And I had as much fun making it, like, even though I had Mike and I was doing a 4-camera shoot, but all the other information that I intercut was amazing. Because, man, there's a lot to know about wound ballistics and how to, like, what I never knew I don't know if you know this.
Probably not.
If you're shot, they don't take the bullet out. I figured, like, as movies tell you, isn't that? No, they don't. They don't take the bullet out. And I didn't know that. So wound ballistics was the beginning of my education. And there's something called wound packing.
Oh, sure.
So if you're shot and an artery is hit or something, basically what you do is, if you're not carrying some kind of first aid gauze with you, if you do have first aid gauze, you stuff it into the wound. If somebody's shot, you're stuffing gauze, or even if you have a T-shirt, you tear it up and you pack the wound. I knew nothing about any of this. And we shot it. We shot demonstrations of this, and Mike gives a lecture. And so I brought my filmmaking skills to this thing, and I didn't know where it was going to lead, but it just became accredited, and now each individual piece has to be accredited, but you just never know what you're going to work on and where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Like I told you before, work begets work. Who knows what's going to happen in your Hollywood career?
Well, absolutely, man. And truly, this is something that if you wanted to pursue it and things were working out as far as dramatically and everything, then you've got this great credit. And you can go to others that want to shoot master classes and stuff. And I have no doubt, Rob, that I'm sure it looks amazing. And that's great. And, you had told me about it before, but now this new chapter that it's been accredited, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what's really funny. Mike and Lori are dear, dear friends of mine. And I mean, I've known them for decades. And Lori was all excited. She's like, you should start a whole new career doing master classes for people. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm thinking it took me a year to cut this 50 hours of material. She was a taskmaster. And I'm like, the amount, you have to get the material correct. You have to make sure it's absolutely perfect. And I'm like, shoot me now. I can only imagine with the amount of work that it is, yes, I could fall back into doing it, perhaps, but man, was it a lot of work. I'm very proud of it. Of all the things that I've done, actually, John, I mean, I'm really proud because anybody who watches it, it doesn't matter who you are, you will be able to save lives. And with the amount of shootings that happen and all, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, good
people
Lord.
Wounded. It's all about pre-hospital care. And I'm like, man, that's amazing.
Yeah, man. No, that's a huge accomplishment. And I hear you, man. All right, here's another good movie reference, especially given that it's Robert Wuhl's birthday this week. It's him and Mistress when he's doing all those like cooking demonstration videos instead of what he really wants to do, film directing. And you know that movie, of course.
Oh, okay. It's so funny that you bring this up. I used to date this girl named Mary Forrest.
Okay.
And she talked about, before we were dating, but when I just knew her, she would talk about Mistress. And she's like, I'm going to get you the laser disc of Mistress. And I'm like, I'd never heard of this movie. I'd never seen this movie. It's funny you bring it up. Martin Landau, right? Yep, Martin Landau's in it.
Eli Wallach, Martin Landau.
Eli Wallach. I mean, it's an incredible film. Yeah. I'd never seen it. I didn't know it. And she got me the laser disc, which, by the way, I still have. Yes, I do. I still have the laser. And the fact that you rock the Robert Wuhl reference and Mistress, I mean, that's why I love talking to you.
Well, likewise. Again, man, kindred
my
spirits.
God.
Absolutely, man. No, I know. Well, that's the thing. And every now and then when I ask on your YouTube channel, like Otherworld, and you told me that it was on YouTube, I think the last time we talked.
Jonathan Banks, bro.
Yes.
and El Camino drops tonight at midnight, and we don't even know if Jonathan Banks, who was at the premiere. I mean, I love Jonathan Banks all the way back to Wise Guy.
Me too, man. Me too.
You know?
Yep.
Wise Guy, one of the great 3 seasons.
Yes. Yeah, I know. The 4th season, although it's a shame.
Stephen Bauer, you're right. It's four seasons. Stephen Bauer replaced Ken Wall as Vinny Terranova. I know.
Yeah. Unlike when Anthony John Dennison, I forget how you say his name.
Anthony Dennison, no.
That was fantastic with Jerry Lewis. That was amazing how they were able to keep the vibe going when Ken Wall went down. And
you had Stanley Tucci. That show, the Glenn Frey, what's really sad about
Go on.
Wise Guy, if we can just talk about it for a minute. Wise Guy is one of my most favorite television shows of all time, and it was also a victim of music rights. Because back in the 80s, nobody understood that television could later be repurposed in home video. So if no one's ever seen Wise Guy, basically Wise Guy is a show that if you thought about the premise now, basically you had a law enforcement officer named Vinny Terranova who goes into prison for 6 months to develop a cover story so he can go undercover, and he works for the OCB, the Organized Crime Bureau, and his agent his handler is Jonathan Banks. And it's so great. It was where Kevin Spacey got his big break.
Yes, he and Joan Severance.
Prophet.
Yeah, he and Joan Severance.
Wow. Susan Prophet, the weird incestuous brother and sister.
Yikes.
Ray Sharkey.
Yes.
I'm gonna live forever.
Fred Thompson. The Watergate lawyer, and of course, submarine or aircraft carrier commander in Hunt for Red October.
He played Knox Pooley, the white supremacist.
And one of the last
second season.
One of the last great dramatic Jerry Lewis performances, and I'm not being ironic saying that, as you know, and like in that Stanley Tucci, Ron Silver ensemble. And again,
the rag trade. That was the rag trade, the garment district. I mean, Wise Guy was so good. I love that show so much. But what happened was they did a music industry storyline, the Dead Dog record storyline.
That's
Paul
right.
Winfield was in it. Glenn Fry was in it. And they had all this music. Debbie Harry. And they didn't license the music properly.
Yep.
So when it finally came out on home video, there was like 10 episodes of Wise Guy they couldn't release because they didn't license the music. And it's still, to this day, never been available. I bought the Wise Guy complete series.
Me too.
It was released by Mill Creek. And you don't have the Dead Dog record. Patty DeArmonville.
Yes. And Electro Woman, Deidre Hall.
Oh, Deidre Hall, yes. Electro Woman and Tiny Girl. I mean, you know, people are like thinking to us right now, what the hell are they talking about?
We literally are like the two guys at the old people's home. Hey, remember Kay Kaiser? She was great.
Get off my lawn! But no, and by the way, Wise Guy was a precursor to all the TV shows we have now.
Oh, 100%. Well, really, too, Donnie Brasco, because that's how I've always, like, shorthand described it.
Oh,
and by the way, television impresario and comic book creator Mark Guggenheim, if he's listening, is loving this, because we've spent like an hour talking about just Wise Guy and just geeking over it and stuff.
A Wise Guy is, I mean, if you haven't seen the first season, I'll tell you a funny story. So I worked, my first long-term job in the industry was at Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. And I worked at Warner Brothers in the late 80s, and Mario Van Peebles, who had directed New Jack City for Warner Brothers, he had directed one of the episodes of Wise Guy when they went to Washington, D.C., when William Russ, Buckwheat, hey Buckwheat,
and Norman Lloyd was the corrupt senator.
So good. So he is at Warner Brothers, and I was only I was a management trainee. I was the lowest of the low, but I worked in the executive building. I worked with the top, with Mark Canton and Terry Semel and Bob Daly and Bruce Berman and the heads of Warner Brothers. So Mario Van Peebles was just in the office, and I'm there, and because I was in the executive branch, executive wing, I could talk to anybody, and they weren't scared of talking to me. So Mario Van Peebles is there. I'm like, oh my God, Mario Van Peebles, I gotta tell you. He's like, I know you love New Jack City. I was like, no, dude, I love the episode of Wise Guy you directed. Although I did love New Jack City. And he's like, nobody knows I directed an episode of Wise Guy. I mean, it was amazing. The whole invasion of El Pavo and the thing. And, And he just thought it was hilarious that I knew he directed an episode of television. And it was Wise Guy. And I'm like, dude, that's how rad you are. You're in The Exterminator 2. You directed New Jack City and an episode of Wise Guy. And it was great. And he was very gracious, very nice guy. And he was so funny. He's like, I don't even think the guys in the executive wing that are going to greenlight my next project have any idea I directed an episode of Wise Guy. I said, you know what? I'm just a management trainee. You send them down to me and I'll set them straight.
That's hilarious. In a word balloon from a few years ago, I had Reggie Hudlin on, and I was asking him about the differences between making movies. And, of course, his new Jack City House Party is one of my absolute favorite films. But he's been doing interesting TV, and it was fun to hear him talking about doing the different disciplines and just what has to go in. And I know you know it as well. In fact, Mitch Halleck, the organizer of Terrificon, was telling me about when Mark Altman asked him to interview some of the starlets that he had from Femme Fatales.
Oh, yes, which I directed 5 episodes of that.
Yes, indeed. And I mentioned, I go, Burnett actually directed some episodes of those. And, it was great. No, and it's funny, man, he's got a good relationship with Mark, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Because I said, you should get Rob out of there, man, for the 20th anniversary of Free Enterprise. And I'm sorry you didn't do it, man.
Which is this year.
Yeah, man.
It was June 4th. I'm hoping. I mean, I would one day. I'd love to buy the negative from the producer, and what I really want to do is I want to do a final frontier cut, a real cut, the final. We had the 5-year mission extended edition, but now I want to do the final frontier cut. Coppola did the final cut of Apocalypse Now. He's doing Cotton Club Encore. So why shouldn't I do a third cut of Free Enterprise, which will be the definitive cut? My God. Yes.
All right. I totally agree, man, and I would love to see that happen, and hopefully these projects will lead to you capable of doing that. Well, I've got a million things I want to talk to you about, and and we're always happy to ramble, and that's fine, and we can go on our tangents. But first of all, and I've been waiting for you to do it on your YouTube show, but I am really interested because a lot of times we end up liking and disliking the same things, and we'll get to those things in a minute. But
because we're right.
Because we're right.
Yeah, it's because we're right. We're correct.
Well, this might be the divide, Rob, because I really liked Ad Astra. I really, really liked Ad Astra, and I'm interested in hearing first because as you kind of told me, I think in our text to each other, that you were disappointed by it.
Okay. Here's the thing. I feel like it was a story that was transposed into science fiction. And the science fiction of it and the science itself was not great.
I understand.
And that it bothered me. What's really interesting is me. I've been called the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, which is something I will embrace wholeheartedly. And my whole thing is I'll believe anything. I love science fiction, horror, and fantasy, but you have to make me believe. And like Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, a lot of people had a lot of problems with it, but within the context of that movie, man, I believed.
Okay.
I was terrified. I was terrified by Gravity. Interstellar, I didn't believe it.
Okay.
The end in the bookshelf, I'm like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. Ad Astra, same thing. You've got to make me believe. If you're telling me that something that's happening on the outer reaches of the solar system is going to affect the Earth, like I know, even traveling at the speed of light or whatever, I know that. How long did it take one of our probes to get past Neptune?
Yeah.
Decades.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Decades. And if you understand space and the stellar mechanics, it's not exactly – it doesn't lend itself well to a breakneck narrative.
Sure. Absolutely. Yes.
And so if you're going to delve into that world, you have to tell me a story where I believe in it. Like I believe in it. And I don't think – and I'm a James Gray fan. He made a movie called Two Lovers with Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay.
That I really liked. I mean, and he I was at USC when he was there.
Oh,
and
wow.
And it's great to see, him having the success, but there was also a lot of talk, and I don't know about what happened, but that a second unit director, Dan Bradley, who's very talented, came on and directed that moon buggy chase. And I'm like, what is this?
I love that.
It was awesome, right? But what the hell does it have to do with the film?
Well, I understood the idea that, and by the way, obviously spoilers, and I've said this already in the introduction, but I'm letting you know you can spoil as much as you want about all these things that we're talking about. I bought the idea of, okay, we're going to do a secret moon launch. It's going to be on the dark side of the moon. To get there, there's this no man's land. And in fact, they never say it, but I'm like, oh, when he lands on the moon and it looks like the shittiest airport you can imagine,
right?
It cracked me up because I'm like, yeah, because as we know, there are all these treaties about, no, the moon is neutral territory, so no government can claim it or country. But, McDonald's will put a place, and obviously Subway and DHL, as he's walking through the airport. And I loved the contrast. So I bought the idea of no man's land, and there might be, call them space pirates, but really, they were just, hijack men, essentially. And that was cool. And when I was talking to Larry Young about it, because I couldn't wait to talk about it at Astra with somebody, he pointed out that the Marauders had astronaut uniforms, which was fantastic. Space.
But still, man, where are they living? Where's their base of operation? Like, how do they know? It's one thing, like, I'll buy Somali pirates. When you're going around the African coast, I get it. But, like, on the moon?
Well, they could be undercover and living, some mundane life, and then they get together and do some wilding. I don't know.
There's no mundane life on the moon.
What's that?
There's no mundane life on the moon. It's like every day is a struggle. Every day is a struggle. And like, here's the thing. As we know from 2001, still probably the greatest science fiction film ever made.
We're going there.
There's
Go on. Yes.
Product placement. Howard Johnson's is there. Yes. There's Bell Telephone with their video phones. You've got, of course, Pan American, which no longer exists. There was great product placement in 2001, but you believe in it. But at Astra, like,
that's really interesting, Rob. Go on.
Well, it's like they want to have all those things, but it's not exactly the off-world colonies for a wonderful time of whatever. It's not like Blade Runner.
No, absolutely.
It's still a prototypical, like, one of my favorite science fiction shows ever has become The Expanse.
Yeah, I know, man. I got to really get into it. I mean, everyone who loves it raves about it. And shame on me, but yeah, I really got to watch it.
It's literary based. It's based on books. But, one of the things about The Expanse is it's not exactly, you're not seeing commercial products everywhere.
Sure.
Because when you're dealing with what life would be like living in space, the idea of advertising all these things would be fine. But if you want to have a Subway club with double meat, and I enjoy a Subway club with double meat, how do you really expect, are they shipping in sandwich meats on a daily basis to the moon so Subway can make your sandwich?
And again, that mundane life on the moon, I was going to say, tell that to the guy making the double meat footlong for you, because I kind of like that. And to me, it was part of the whole subtext of the movie in terms of, Dad, guess what? We're out here in deep space, and it doesn't matter. It's the antithesis of the mystery of 2001. And that's
of course.
And that's what I loved about it. I liked that they were giving us a different spin on the same milieu, for a lack of a better word.
Sure.
And I thought that was great. And comparing Dr. Floyd's flight to the moon to Brad Pitt's, and I liked it. And again, that subtext of, Dad, there is no space angel that's going to solve the Earth's problems. It's just us. We need you. Please come back. And I bought it, and I bought all the weirdness and also the mundane, like that the moon, as cool as it is like, yeah, it's the moon. Oh, yeah, get a Happy Meal while you're up here, or, whatever. Like, you should join the Subway Club. That cracked me up.
How can Subway afford to employ workers at their moon? Can you imagine how expensive it would be to have fast food workers on the moon?
That's great.
Like, I need somebody flipping burgers here at the Sea of Tranquility.
But maybe I get what you're saying, Robin. I don't disagree. That's why I'm laughing every time you're pointing this shit out. But I don't know, man. I just kind of, and again, with the announcement that Elon Musk is, was ready. You probably know the story better than I do, that in terms of what he's trying to do with his spacefaring craft. And then also, I don't know if you saw it or was interested in watching it, but the Washington Post hosted this interesting staged Q&A with Brad Pitt, is it James Gray?
Oh, yeah.
And the two NASA scientists. I didn't realize we're 5 years away from going back to the moon.
Oh, yeah. No, it's incredible. I mean, what's amazing to me is the only thing that stops anybody from doing anything, especially in Hollywood, is money.
Sure.
And if you're like Elon Musk and you're like, yep, I'm going to start a rocket company, and you get a contract. And by the way, a lot of people have a lot of problems with Elon Musk.
Sure.
But he's returning rockets from orbit that land on barges at sea. I mean, what he's doing is so beyond comprehension. If you look at how the American space program has worked, it is so. Sorry, my dogs might be barking in the background.
Gilbert and they're welcome. They're both
Gilbert
welcome.
and Tallulah. It's amazing what he's been able to do, and the fact that he's built. I mean, the guy has built a Flash Gordon-looking spacecraft with rivets. I mean, it is the most amazing thing in the world. And if he gets that thing to fly and he goes to, like, look, I thought it was insane when he launched a car into space, and it's playing David Bowie. You can't hear it because it's the vacuum of space. But he could have just taken a weight up there to do a test. But no. I'm going to send out a Tesla, my own Tesla, with a spaceman that's going to play David Bowie, and it's going to go to Mars. And there's a camera there. He did it. And what's really interesting is that, you watch, like, recently HBO's From the Earth to the Moon came out on Blu-ray.
Love that series.
It's one of my favorite things ever. The Blu-ray is terrible. And HBO's
I remember you saying it. Go on.
They're shameful. But it's such a great show. But you think about how the American space program worked.
Yes.
And basically Elon Musk is like Jeff Bridges and Tucker.
Yes.
He's rich. He already made his money, but he's building spaceships, and he's like, you know what? We're just going to go do this stuff. And he's thinking it up and doing it. And you're like, that's what America's – it's funny because he's Russian, and it's like he's just thinking this stuff up and going and doing it and building spaceships and bringing them down. Like, you can buy a Tesla and you don't even have to drive it to work. You can just set it up and it'll drive you to work. And he's doing all of this for all of his craziness and smoking dope on Joe Rogan's show, and people are like,
I remember.
Oh my God, Elon Musk is smoking a doobie on the Joe Rogan show. Oh my God. But the fact is, he's building rockets that go to orbit and land again.
Yep.
What he's doing is amazing. And to me, why isn't America doing that all the time?
I hear you, man.
Like, why aren't we doing cool shit all the time? And watching what he's done it's been pretty extraordinary, because he just does a bunch of cool shit over and over again. And while we watch everything else, like, we should be living in a time. I mean, perhaps it is. By the way, next month is November 2019.
Right.
That's when Blade Runner took place.
Yep.
And I live in Los Angeles, and downtown LA is looking more and more like Blade Runner. And there is actually a bar opening, like a pop-up bar for the month of November that celebrates Blade Runner. I bought tickets for it back in July. And it's, they had a problem with licensing with Alcon and apparently whatever. Anyway,
Hilarious.
I mean,
that's fantastic.
Blade Runner. There are no replicants in real life. There are no flying cars. We're getting there.
I hear you, man.
Elon Musk, I'm sure, is getting us there soon, but it's pretty amazing where we're living now.
Oh, yeah, man. No, and I agree. And we got these supercomputers in our pockets, which is just insane. But I'm sure you felt the same way. And I know part of it is your love of Star Trek. And we'll get to Discovery and Picard shortly. But, I really thought we'd have jetpacks by the time we were in our 50s, being a little kid. Because,
well, especially, come on, we all saw Thunderball.
Exactly.
The opening scene. James Bond.
All the uses of, hell, even just demonstrations at the Super Bowl, where a guy would show up at halftime and be on a jetpack and stuff, or college games, or pro games.
Well, what about that French dude that crossed the English Channel with that, like, water jet thing or whatever recently? I mean, we do have them.
Yeah.
They're just not commonplace.
No, and they're not practical, and but no, literally, honestly, and maybe this shows my lack of maturity, but when I was like 7 years old, I'm like, when I'm 50, I bet we get there. In that same way that the original series of Star Trek, I'm like, all right, it's a little goofy, but I could see some semblance of an evolution of NASA and what we were getting with the Apollo missions and beyond. And I'm like, oh no, I could see us kind of evolving into a Starfleet and them having this elaborate crew and taking deep space missions in 400 years. Sure, why not? 300 years, whatever it was, you know.
Well, the Trump administration has started a... Hey, Tallulah, she's barking.
No problem.
The Trump administration has started a space force, but I'm very disappointed as to, like, if you start a space force, let's see some action. Like, let's jump into it. Let's be like Elon Musk and have returnable spaceships from orbit.
Totally.
Like, if you're going to start a space force, make it cool. And you know what? What bums me out is one of my favorite movies is, of course, The Right Stuff.
Of course.
And From the Earth to the Moon, what a great miniseries that is, and how America had dominance in space. So if our president, Donald Trump, is going to announce a space force, I want to see some action. I'm like, let's jump into it, man. Let's make that space force happen. And I feel like, well, there was one photo op, but where are the spaceships?
Yep.
You know, we got the ISS. I mean, who knows what's going on? There's subterfuge. One of the Soyuz capsules, someone drilled a hole in it. I mean, we've already got all kinds of stuff. Why isn't our space force flying? You know, Elon Musk could make it fly if he had the money of the American government behind it. But, I mean, because who doesn't want... Look, it might be a funny thing that the Trump administration started a space force, but secretly we're all like, dude, that is so cool.
Yeah, man.
I'm like, I might be middle-aged with one foot in the grave, but I want to join the Space Force. I'm part of it. Where is my Space Force basic training? I will sign up.
Well, and now with your accredited course, you can actually help if there's some bleeding in space.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine? I can do a zero-gravity version of crisis medicine tactical casualty care. Here's what's going to happen. How do we make it work? I don't even know, but, you know, if you're the victim, and I'm sure America will be the first country in the world that will have a mass shooting in space. But if that happens and you're part of it, if somebody goes nuts on the ISS, I want to be there and pack their wounds in zero gravity.
You're killing me. And honestly, that was my one secret wish about Ad Astra in terms of whatever the military evolves in. I'm like, please call it Space Force. Please, just once. Say Space Force. Right? That would have been hilarious. But,
well, Steve Carell's finally going to get on that TV show. He's doing the Space Force sitcom, or apparently he was going to do for that Netflix.
Well, and I know you're excited.
Why not?
I mean, we've got way too many streaming channels already, but that Ron Moore show about the alternate history where the Russians
I can't wait.
In the space. What's it called again?
It's called For All Mankind.
For All Mankind, yeah, man. No, I'm so excited for that. And you know, I got to say, as a quick aside, the Galactica reboot, well, and they're saying it's not a reboot, it'll stay within Moore's continuity.
Which is so weird.
Well, here's
what does that mean?
Here's a theory. Maybe this is a different version of Galactica 1980 where it takes place in modern day and those prehistoric Cylons have integrated into human society. And there's a whole secret conspiracy of Cylons running around today. And
well, that, you know what, with Sam Esmail, that sounds like something he would do. And by the way, the first Earth, we find that first Earth that's destroyed,
yes.
that the
nuclear
the 5 Cylons,
yeah,
maybe that's part of it all. I mean, who
that's
knows?
A good point too. Yeah, that's a very good point. No, I'm intrigued. I have to say, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's called Battlestar Galactica, but look, as long as I'm a fan of anything that's good,
sure,
well written, as I always say. You know, if it's got a great characters and a great story, I don't care what it is. I mean, I'm still waiting for a sequel to Tough Turf.
Another
with Robert Downey Jr. and James Spader from 1985,
and the great Kim Richards,
and the great and Olivia Barish from Repo Man.
Oh my
God. What a cast!
Oh, I didn't make that connection. That's great. You know,
Paul Moniz from the beginning of Streets of Fire. When the Roadmasters are hungry, they eat. He was in it too.
I'm so sad when I see the train wreck that Kim Richards' life is on that Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever. Because I'm like, that's a shame, man. She was great. We loved her.
She's Tia from Escape to Witch Mountain.
Yes, indeed. Well, even in Nanny and the Professor, even before that.
Oh, my God. I mean, when you were growing up in the 70s as a young boy, who didn't love Tia and her, like, extraterrestrial lunchbox she had? Like, And she made a Winnebago fly upside down.
You're killing me, man. All right, moving on. We got to talk about Joker because we're both lifelong comic book fans.
Oh yeah.
And again, I saw it Sunday, and I had mixed feelings about it, and I'm happy to spoil, and I wanted to have a discussion with somebody about it in general. I liked the movie from an acting standpoint, but as you said, and I agree with you, I don't believe Joaquin Phoenix, this Joker would become a criminal mastermind that would vex Batman. I don't believe it. I didn't see anything in his past, and I also don't believe he will suddenly gain these skills in the ensuing years. I didn't. That's my main complaint about it. But obviously, then I want to hear some of yours, and we'll go back and forth.
Well, no, I agree with you. I think, as I've said on my own show, and I've talked about on the John Campea show, I admire the craft that went into making Joker. It's a beautifully made, beautifully shot film. However, first of all, if you've grown up, and you and I, we're both cineasts. I mean, if you've grown up with Martin Scorsese's movies,
absolutely,
and you've seen Taxi Driver 100 million times, and you've seen King of Comedy, and you've watched the Todd Phillips is a student of 70s movies. I get what he's trying to do. And basically, Joker is a shameless, let's just call it an homage, but a shameless amalgamation of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy.
Yep.
And it's one thing to say that, but the fact is that pop culture really lasts maybe 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
Well, both King of Comedy and Taxi Driver are beyond that.
That's right.
So most of the people, especially I call them the post-geek singularity, my imagination connoisseur viewers, they might say they've seen Taxi Driver or King of Comedy. They really haven't. They don't know. So all of the people, I'm reading all of this amazing, oh my God, yes, Joker's the most amazing thing in the world. And I'm like, you know what? It's amazing if you did not see King of Comedy or Taxi Driver back in the day. Todd
Phillips is a Scorsese cover band.
That's exactly kind of like Kylo Ren is in a Darth Vader cover band. and I feel like we now. By the way, here's what I would say. Here's one of the things I think it's most important. The thing that I find to be most important about Joker. It is the first movie, in my mind, in the world that's ever been made that is a absolutely based, it's comic book, it's a Batman villain.
Yep.
It is absolutely derived from comic books. But it is the first movie ever made that completely jettisons its comic book origins. If you didn't know anything about Joker, if you didn't know it was a comic book property, there is not one shred of fantasy in the movie aside from his own fantasies.
Right. Agreed.
There's not one element of the fantastic. There's not one element of reality shattering fantasy that takes it to a different level. It is truly, I think, the first transcendent comic book movie that is a film that completely exists outside of its comic book origins. And if you didn't know anything about Batman or the Joker and you just watch this film called Joker, it has a lot to say about the state and mental illness and urban living and people that are disenfranchised and what does it mean. There's so many people, there's so much mental illness in the world today, and there's more people medicated than ever before.
Yep.
And there's a lot more. I mean, there's more. We know more about mental illness and the diagnoses of mental illness than has ever existed before. So people are getting care that they couldn't get. However, socially, back in the Reagan era, we got rid of a lot of the care, the federally funded. Back in the 80s, a lot of the asylums or the facilities, like in One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest, they don't exist anymore.
That's right, they were defunded.
They were all defunded, and all of that is taken away. And we have incredible mental illness going on all levels of society, and the Joker takes that on Takes it on head on.
Agreed.
It is not subtle.
No.
And really, it is, you read about all of these mass shooting events that are going on, these young men that are in their early 20s, all of them, without fail, are all medicated.
Yep.
They've been medicated for a very long period of time. You read about the kind of medication they're on, and when you're dealing with that, when your mind for years has been inundated with drugs, you're trying to control a biological process with chemicals that we don't even understand consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so we're shooting at this stuff thinking, okay, we've figured out a way that a drug will do one thing, but we have no idea what the ramifications are to a larger extent for the rest of consciousness.
Yep.
We have no idea.
Yep.
We're shutting down one neuron or one pathway and not understanding what that does to the rest of a person's mind.
Absolutely, man. I agree with all of that. Go on.
And I think that Joker does a fine job of getting into what the psychic storm that many people who suffer from mental illness have, when their medication works or when it doesn't, or what they have and what they don't, and when they can afford it and when they can't. I mean, they're basically living in a perpetual tropical storm where, depending on how fast the wind is blowing or how high the barometer is, and the waves are lapping and the lightning is flashing, they don't know what's going on, and we don't really understand mental illness exactly. And I think that Joker does a good job of showing that, and showing how society doesn't understand it, and how Arthur Fleck could be any one of us.
Sure. Go on. No.
I like Joker from that perspective.
Agreed.
But it's not a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is not a treatise about the mentally ill. This is about a homicidal maniac that ends up fighting the Dark Knight detective.
Yep. And also,
Oh, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
That's all right, buddy. And I appreciate your points because I agree with all of them. And that the way I think they could have just done Thomas Wayne. And show Bruce. We didn't need to see Crime Alley once again. And that's fine.
My God.
It's a choice. But even worse, and really more integral to the story that Phillips was trying to tell, I don't believe that the De Niro character would have humiliated a comic the way that he did, which was the catalyst to the conclusion. And I love the homage to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns graphic novel in that final scene. But I just, honestly, with all that realism, I didn't buy De Niro ridiculing him. I didn't buy him putting him on the show. I didn't buy the Joker giving his soliloquy about the evils of society. I'm like, no. I'm sorry. And again, and in fact, I think it was campy on his shows, like, maybe in the 21st century, security would have ran there or whatever. I'm like, no, man. Geraldo had fistfights on his reality show, and we had security there. I'm like, this wouldn't have happened. And that kind of took me out of the realism of the film, and also the fake out. Although it worked in the story, but the initial fake out of, he's Thomas Wayne's other son, and I couldn't help myself. I muttered bullshit in the theater because I'm like,
right.
Don't do that. Please don't do that. It's so unnecessary. The Joker is scariest when he is psychotic and random. And I got a little bit of that randomness, but like you said, I didn't buy that this is the calculating genius that is psychotic, but also a genius. And right. I just didn't see that in this portrayal.
And people would say that, well, this was the beginning of that. He went off his meds and all that. But at the end of the day, I mean, I appreciated what they were trying to do.
Yes.
And the craft on display is amazing. The cinematography, Joaquin Phoenix's performance, amazing.
Yep.
It truly was. But you know what? As you know, we're steeped in comic books, and I think about what Alan Moore did in both Killing Joke and in Watchmen.
Yep.
And when I first talked about the Joker, I couldn't help but go back to that scene in the Watchmen where Rorschach is sitting across from his therapist.
Yep.
And talking about Pagliacci, the clown, and tells the story to his therapist about how a guy goes in and sees his therapist and says, life is terrible. I don't know why I should live. I mean, I can't function. And the therapist says, well, you should go see Pagliacci, the great clown, is in town tonight. Go see his performance. He'll make you feel better about everything. And the man turns around and says, but doctor, I am Pagliacci.
Yep.
And I'm like, to me, that's a couple of panels in a comic book. And that's what the entirety of the Joker movie is.
Agreed.
It's Alan Moore covered that in one page in Watchmen. And again, I don't mean to say that Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore could have accomplished what Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix did, because it's a different thing.
Yeah.
But the meaning behind it, I mean, we so crave, especially genre film fans and comic book fans, we are so quick to imbue this stuff with a lot more meaning than it perhaps has earned. And I think about the movies that I love, like A Clockwork Orange, which is one of my favorite films of all time,
sure.
and all of the things that I've loved. And I think about how subtle and also how over the top. I think about the virtuosity that has been on display that I've seen growing up, even in Taxi Driver as well. And I'm like, I feel, again, that Joker, as good as it was, is still, like you said, it's a cover band.
Yeah, man.
I feel like everything else that I see in pop culture, I'm like, Doomsday Clock.
Go on.
I have liked Jeff Johns' work. I've enjoyed it in the past.
Sure.
But the man does not have the knowledge that Alan Moore had to write a sequel to Watchmen. And I might have enjoyed it. It seemed like the ultimate fan film, but I'm like, dude, what you're trying to do, you're falling short because you've decided that you're cool enough to write a sequel to Watchmen and bring those characters in the DC universe. I'm like,
I understand. And we'll see. We got one more issue, and I'm willing to see if he can stick the landing in the last issue. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
I've enjoyed Doomsday Clock.
I have for the most part. Yeah.
For what it is.
Yes.
But I look at what Hickman's doing with Power Effects and House Effects. I'm like, this is kind of mind blowing.
Yes.
I'm kind of like, wow, this is. I haven't been as. To me, the X-Men were Star Trek.
Sure.
I love the X-Men. I read them. Teen Titans, Wolfman and Perez's Teen Titans, and Claremont and the X-Men in the early '80s. I loved both comics, and I finally I got so sick of the X-Men because it was the same stories. I mean, how many hundreds of issues? There's only so many stories you can tell, and I feel like when I was reading the was it Mark Miller's Cassandra Nova X-Men run?
Yeah. Ultimate X-Men.
I'm like, and I'm like, this is awesome. Yeah. The new X-Men run. That was 20 years ago?
Yeah, it was. It was. Yikes.
and
Yikes.
Power of X, House of X, I'm like, wow, this is you had to know the entire history of the X-Men. But if you did, and you're reading what he's doing, I'm like, this is dope.
Yeah.
It's got heady sci-fi concepts. I don't know how it's going to all pan out, but I'm like, okay, somebody's doing something different. But what I feel is there's what I'm missing, and what I'm missing with Joker is it leans so heavily into Scorsese's work that I feel that if you've watched it, if you grew up watching Taxi Driver, which I did.
Yep, me too.
100 times, it's really difficult to watch Joker and think of it as like, oh my God, it's so original.
Right.
I'm like, I'm watching, no, it's really not. And it doesn't have as much going on in it as Taxi Driver or King of Comedy.
Yeah. No, I love both movies. And it's interesting how, and maybe we've talked about this before, I don't know, but King of Comedy's ending, I think, has morphed as films, as we get older, can kind of change. And what was likely, and I'm not in Martin Scorsese's brain, but what I think the ending of King of Comedy was in Rupert Pupkin's mind.
Yep.
But now, today, it's like, no, it absolutely would have been. Rupert Pupkin would have gone to jail. wrote his book, is out.
Yep.
And some schmuck is going to, put him on a comedy tour and let him finally have his career. Because we've seen it so many times where both reality crime TV and also just reality TV has suddenly created these celebrities.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I go back and what's funny is, I've become the old man shouting on my front lawn.
Me too.
And it's strange. Even though I do my YouTube shows and I've been on YouTube, basically my audience skews from their early 20s to their mid 50s. I mean, that's my audience.
No, me too, man. Yeah.
And a lot of it's, younger. But what's funny is having grown up when all this stuff was new and watched, I used to watch Network.
Sure.
Patty Chayefsky wrote Network. And I thought, Network is so adult.
Yes.
The people, Faye Dunaway, everybody in it, so adult. It all came true.
Yep, I know.
But even though a Network came true, it came true, but everybody is dumber than the people that were in Network.
Yes.
And I'm like, all of this stuff happened, but it happened in a much stupider way than it was portrayed in movies back in the 70s. And I look at this stuff and I'm thinking, my God, I used to watch stuff like Patty Chayefsky. I remember seeing Altered States, even though he disowned it. He still has screenplay credit. I looked at these things that I was watching when I was 13, man.
Yep.
And I'm like, my God, Altered States was my birthday movie or something. And I remember seeing Clockwork Orange when I first got it when I was 13. When Warner Brothers released it on pre-recorded cassette, I watched it.
Okay.
I'd seen it in all these sci-fi film books. I'd seen pictures.
Certainly.
I didn't understand how is Clockwork Orange a science fiction movie, but 70s dystopian, all that sci-fi. Yeah. I watched it twice back to back. It was the first movie I ever watched twice back to back. And I look at all this stuff now and I'm like, when did our society get so dumb? Our pop culture seems to be much we think that Joker is high art now, but I'm like, wait a minute, it's a riff on what Scorsese was doing in the 70s and early 80s, almost half a century ago. We just haven't seen it applied to comic books.
Well, I've got a Touchstone film, and it's so funny because the guy who pointed it out was Tarantino back when we were able to watch Charlie Rose and not Shriek.
Right.
But he was talking about in 75 when Rocky came out.
Sure.
And happy endings were okay again. And really, 95% of Rocky is a gritty 70s movie.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful. And I love it. And it still has that same vibe of all the street movies you can think of, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, and certainly Taxi Driver and Boys in the Band.
And Mean Streets. Yeah.
Mean Streets, absolutely, man. And then it has this
Friends
happy
Connect.
ending. He gets the girl. And it's we could be happy again. And it kind of did. It ushered in audiences liked and missed happy endings because then, of course, the film, and understandably so, was nominated for Best Picture and everything. And didn't it win?
It did win.
There you go. Yeah, man. I mean, so there you go. I mean, all of a sudden it was it's okay to and I really do agree with Tarantino where that might have been the beginning of the end of the 70s and that great, Raging Bulls and I forget the name of Biskin's book.
Easy Riders and Raging Bulls.
Yes, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. But yeah, man, I mean, that's the thing. I think that was kind of the end of the 70s movement that started with the Coppolas and Scorsese's and Spielberg's and stuff. And also, and again, I saw you talk about it on your show. I haven't really had a chance beyond an intro talking about Scorsese's comments on the Marvel movies and stuff. And Spielberg said the same thing, Coppola, and I get it, but I also think it's man, I hope you're not, ignoring the Logans and even Joker to a degree. Again, though, very much a cover band. I don't know, because then also you can say Shane. Isn't Shane basically Yojimbo?
Yeah, of course. I mean,
Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven, of course.
Yeah, and I think what Scorsese is so funny to me because he loves genre cinema.
Exactly.
And what I don't understand is I know he's old school, but to me, like I talked about even today on my show, when I was a kid, I dreamt of seeing superhero movies, whether it's the Avengers and the technology and the idea. It just didn't exist.
Right.
It couldn't have happened. And the way those movies, comic books were disposable.
Yes.
They were literally like trashy, fun things for kids that were printed on newsprint. They cost 15 or 20 cents, and they could be thrown away. And we had a renaissance in the 80s about now graphic storytelling was big in Europe and also in Asia, but in America it was a ghettoized thing.
100%.
And what we saw in the 80s, whether it was Frank Miller on Daredevil and then it moved over to Ronin, and you had like Camelot 3000, you had Khazar, Micronauts, and Moon Knight direct sale books.
Oh yeah.
And then what happened, and then with Crisis, and what happened with Dark Knight Returns, and then of course Watchmen, and then Marvel's later, and Kingdom Come. And I mean, what was really interesting was the evolution, especially in the 80s and 90s, of the superhero characters.
Agreed.
And it was a complete 180 in terms of the kind of stories you could tell through the prism of a superhero story. Mm-hmm. And it didn't exist before. And once that happened, as technology caught up, we did see, of course, Tim Burton's Batman, but that still took place. Tim Burton's Batman, we had Superman the movie in 78 and Tim Burton's Batman in 89. Those were sort of one-offs.
Yes.
And then we saw in 94 The Crow.
Yes.
J.O. Barbason, which was like the Blade Runner of goth, sci-fi horror, supernatural.
Yeah.
And then Blade.
Yep.
And then, let's not talk about Steel, but when you get to X-Men in 2000, you really saw an evolution, and superheroes were then, especially X-Men, because X-Men are not just superheroes, they're science fiction.
Right.
So the first X-Men with Bryan Singer's first X-Men, even though it was $75 million, and then you saw Spider-Man, and then after that, other Daredevil was made, Elektra was made, Ghost Rider was made. And then, of course, we got to Iron Man in 2008. And the idea of what a superhero movie was, you realize, it's multiple genres. And the MCU was like, oh, yeah, Winter Soldier's, we'll hire Robert Redford, and we'll hark back to 3 Days of the Condor and All the President's Men. And suddenly the
great comedy.
Ant-Man comedy and a heist movie. Yep. And you saw these different kinds of things, and it's really interesting. And so when Martin Scorsese is talking about, well, this isn't cinema, I'm like, this is genre cinema writ large on the big screen. 100%. Are you gonna start like bagging on slasher movies of the 80s, saying they're not cinema? I understand it's not Bergman.
Right.
It's not Ozu or Truffaut or Antonioni or whatever. I get it.
Right.
And you're not going to have Max von Sydow playing chess with death.
Yes, yes.
When Thanos is deciding to snap his finger and exterminate half of every being in the universe, there's something going on there beyond a four-color fantasy. There is something to be said, but you have to be of the mindset that, perhaps this Scorsese grew up in a world where comic books were disposable. The guy was not reading World's Finest. He was not reading Neil Adams' Batman going, I relate to this. But what's funny is Scorsese was listening to the Rolling Stones and getting something out of that. And let's face it, rock and roll is like comic books.
Totally.
The people that love rock and roll are like, oh my God, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I get it. You're talking about the devil, Mick. I get it. But you know what? There's Mephisto. and there's Darkseid, and there's Thanos, and the anti-life equation. And while I understand, they might look a little goofy, Jack Kirby's art might not be your thing, but basically Jack Kirby was the Rolling Stones.
I like that.
It's just, it wasn't music, it was comic books. His fourth world, he came to DC and, he created half the Marvel Universe, or even more than half, but he comes to DC and gets all wacky. It's Jimmy Olsen and his friends turn into Darkseid, and Mr. Miracle, and Big Barda, and oh my God.
And Don Rickles.
I mean,
in the middle of the New Gods. No, I'm excited for Anna Duvay and Tom King, and I can't imagine what they're cooking up. And Tom's a good friend of mine, and obviously he's got to keep his cards close to the vest.
Dude, I got the hardcover of Heroes in Crisis sitting right here with me.
Oh, it'll be interesting when you finish it because I get that it's a polarizing book, and it's not and I got to know Clay Mann, the artist, as well.
The art's great, by the way.
Oh, Clay's amazing. He's a great artist, and he occasionally pops in for a Batman arc here and there. No, Tom has great artists, and Tom's a really, really smart guy. And, former CIA op and everything, and had his tours in Iraq. And, of course, Sheriff of Babylon is an incredible Vertigo book that everybody should pick up. And I know my people are into it and stuff. No, I keep saying, as far as the superhero films, that I keep comparing them to Westerns. In terms of in the silent era, it was Black Hat versus White Hat. But then by the 50s and 40s with Bud Boetticher and Stanley Kramer making High Noon and stuff, you had more complicated stories, and you had more complicated heroes and villains, and sympathetic villains in some ways, and the genre evolved, and then it became a self-parody in the 70s with Italian westerns, and what's his face? I can't remember his name now. The blonde Italian guy that made all the spaghetti westerns, and post Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and Sergio Leone, and all the good stuff.
Right.
Call Me Trinity. I want to say Trinity was his character and everything.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing, man. So we might get to that point. We probably will. It's amazing that it's been 12 years, or it will be 12 years since Iron Man, and the evolution. And that's why, I mean, again, and Joker is a huge part of that. And I agreed with you when you said, even with the things that we find problems with, I recommend it to everyone who's interested in seeing it, and I'm like, judge it for yourself. Again, we've got these preconceived notions of knowing Taxi Driver and King of Comedy to recognize the cover band aspect of it. But like you said, man, these things are generational, and we've got all these kids that that haven't seen those movies. So and that's like, okay, again, Love Affair became an affair to remember, and then became Love Affair again with Beatty and Annette Bening and stuff. I mean, it happens. That's Hollywood. I mean, they do reuse stories. Star is Born, 5th version, 6th version. I forget which, because there's that one that was on TV and everything too. Got to talk to Bud Schulberg, who wrote the original, was one of the writers on the original with Frederick March and Janet Gaynor and everything. So, I mean, no, it's again. So you shrug and it's like, all right, I get it, and I'll give my opinion, but it's cool, and it's going to be very interesting. Do you think sequel?
Well, with the look, they didn't spend much money on that film, and with the amount of money it made, I mean, it made $230 million worldwide in 3 days. Yep. So that's an extraordinary amount of money for a film on a $50 million spend or $60 million spend. They did very well with it. Yeah. But the funny thing about that movie is, I've always believed that sometimes certain movies should be left alone.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter. Money talks. And, they'll probably end up making a sequel. They'll maybe, bring Batman into it. But if they did, it sort of defeats the purpose of the whole thing. And it's so weird that we live in a world, like, if you think about it, 15 years ago, if you thought that something like the MCU could have even existed, I often say, like, if you asked me 15 years ago if somebody would make an Avengers movie, I would have said, no.
Yeah, good luck.
Like, you'd have to establish Thor, Captain America, Iron Man. No one's going to make an Avengers movie. It would never work. And cut to, we're now in 2019, and they just announced that they're going to release the Infinity Saga box set on 4K disc at Best Buy for $600. You can get all 23 movies. Like, 23 movies? Are you kidding me? The fact that we've got everything from the Guardians of the Galaxy to Captain Marvel to Thanos to Iron Man, the entire Avengers. Who would have thought there'd be 2 Ant-Man movies? Ant-Man and Wasp. Like, are you really? Like, for real?
Go back to Garrett Morris with his parody of Ant-Man back in the 70s on Saturday Night Live. Absolutely,
dude,
man.
I mean, can you imagine? And we live in this world, and that's why, like, all this vitriol that's online, all these fans complaining about everything. I'm like, okay, look, I want things to be great too, and I really hate Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
Because it's a horribly written, horribly conceived show. But I still think, like, wow, somebody believes that some Jablonski should get $15 million. They say $10 million, but let's just say $15 million. $15 million an episode for a Star Trek show where they can put a roller coaster on the inside of the Discovery or the Enterprise. The people who are making the show have no understanding of Star Trek. It's like, if you were part of making a science fiction show is you have to world build.
Of course.
If you're making a Star Trek show now, you have 50 years of technical manuals and designs and books. It's as if these idiots never read any of them.
Wow.
Like, they never, all the work's been done for you. You just have to come in, like, let's make a canonical show that takes place 10 years before Kirk and Spock. Well, that's fantastic. We've got 100 different reference books. We don't even have to do, it's just,
Turn the goddamn show on.
Let's just make it our own. We're going to make up a bunch of shit. And they have a complete lack of understanding of what Star Trek is. I mean, we live in a world where it's all laid out for you, but nobody is doing the work.
Isn't it sad? Because I know I'm a fan of his too, that Star Trek writer David Mack, not to be confused with comic book David Mack, who's a genius as well, but Star Trek David Mack is a consultant for all this Discovery stuff. And I can't imagine the stomachache he must have when they show him a turbo lift that is. Now, it's funny, I didn't see the short trek initially. I thought they were going to start tonight as we're recording this. I didn't realize there was one 5 days earlier. So when you were describing the turbo lift as a roller coaster, I'm like, oh, does it go out of control? And is it like zipping through,
No.
No, it's. I think of it more as a Swiss chalet cable car. And that's what it looked like to me. Or, a bad carnival ride where you're on cables, or even on Her Majesty's Secret Service, of course, to Piz Gloria as well.
Well, I had a guy write me on my show today from the Navy. He's like, in what kind of a ship would they have this much space?
Yes.
And here's the thing. I look at this and I'm like, any person that wants to tell a credible science fiction story, looking at something like this, it's like, this is so stupid looking.
Yes.
It just makes everybody involved with this show look like an idiot.
Yes.
Because in no way, shape, or form could this possibly exist ever. Nor, because if you have a spacefaring vessel, all space is at a premium inside that vessel.
Course.
Apparently, there's a bunch of empty space. It is so dumb.
Yes.
And I look at it and I'm like, in doing something like that, you make everyone that's working on your show look like an idiot.
Well, dude, I thought the savior, pardon me real fast, I just thought this, like, one of the saviors, and we'll get to Star Trek Picard, but as I've told you, Michael Chabon being part of it, I'm like, all right, there's a real geek, and he's really written great.
And I've loved his books.
Yeah.
I mean,
and his short stories, too. Yeah.
Yep.
But man, he wrote that episode, and it's like, how did you let this happen, man? And also, what a waste of money. Because that shot looked like an expensive shot, and it's just am I wrong? I don't know. You're Mr. Hollywood.
It was repurposed. I think it was just a stock shot they used from a previous Discovery episode.
I didn't remember seeing it before. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. Which made maybe they changed it, but they had it built digitally so they could change.
Okay.
It still made my gums bleed, made me want to take a teaspoon and scoop out my eyeballs because it's so monumentally stupid.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of David Mack wrote a Star Trek novel called Section 31, Control.
Yes, sir. I read it.
And the entire second half of season 2 of Discovery was about. By the way, first of all, let me just lay out how stupid the entire Star Trek Discovery writing staff is.
Yeah.
There were three episodes of Section 31 were introduced in Deep Space Nine.
Right.
You know how they introduced Section 31?
Go on, I know, but go on.
They had the great actor. They had the great William Sadler, Bill Sadler, who I work with on Hills Run Red.
Fantastic.
He literally, Julian Bashir wakes up, and Bill Sadler is sitting on a chair in his bedroom. Yep. And Bill Sadler's like, I'm part of Section 31. And then he walks out of the room, and he's disappeared into thin air.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
You don't even know, is Section 31 real? Is it this one guy? You never know. That's the whole cool thing about Section 31. But oh no, in Discovery, you actually wear your own badge on your chest.
Yes.
And you get a membership card.
And secret headquarters. The secret space station.
Here's my secret membership card. And then, yeah, by the end of season 2, they're like, we have our own ships. We have bases. People talk to each other. We get together and have meetings.
Well, and Sisko tells that great, no one in Starfleet can confirm or deny the existence of Section 31. Fantastic. Even more mysterious. Or when Bashir goes to that Romulan conference. And Bill Sadler's beaten up by the Romulans. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. There's this guy, and he's selling us some line about Section 31, some sort of bullshit Tal Shiar, and it's just like, this is amazing. Or when they go in his brain in the final season, the final Sadler appearance. Oh my God, it's fascinating. And yes, they dumb it down and they turn him into mustache twirling bullshit villains. I'm with you, man.
Well, it's almost like, dare I say it, it's like somebody said, there's this thing called Section 31. It's like the CIA of the Federation. Did you ever watch the episodes? Did you ever? It's only a couple of episodes. You could. Clearly, they never did.
Yeah.
And if they did watch the episodes, and that's their version of Section 31 is what they came up with, is why Star Trek Discovery is the worst science fiction television show. I look back at shows like we talked about Otherworld. I look at the Fantastic Journey.
Sure.
Hell, the 6 episodes of whatever, the Logan's Run TV show.
It well.
It seems like high art compared to Star Trek Discovery.
Rob Space Command with Jonathan Harris on Saturday mornings, and Sid, who just died.
Well, that was you had Space Academy, and then Jason of Star Command,
and that's high art compared to Discovery.
I mean, it's like that one episode, like, oh my God, we're going to go 51,000 light years, and suddenly we're going to find a church, like a church that was displaced and plopped on this planet, New Terra, whatever the fuck it was called, and you know what? We're going to create a new religion and make a new tabernacle and we're going to take all the religions of the world and write them together, because apparently the 8 people that were in that church when it was transposed by Burnham's mother, how did she transpose a whole church 51,000 light years? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because I'm writing for Star Trek Discovery, because we have roller coasters and it's so. I mean, I appreciate people like Star Trek Discovery.
Yes,
but if you've ever read a science fiction novel, or you've ever studied any kind of storytelling, like Encyclopedia Brown, or my favorite children's book, Frog and Toad Are Friends. I mean,
I love
all of that. The writing on Star Trek Discovery is so god awful.
Yeah.
And and I say this with all love and affection. Those people who are writing Star Trek Discovery, somebody is one day going to come back in time, if you believe that Burnham's mother will come back in time, and fine them all for wasting tens of millions of dollars. Between season 1 and 2 of Discovery, we're at $300 million. Wow. Have you received $300 million of entertainment? I don't think so. I've certainly
29 hours.
You know what?
Too, Rob. I mean, it's and again, we still don't know that goddamn bridge crew. Good Lord, it pisses me off. It really does, and I'm not going to scream the way. And I've watched a lot of Midnight's Edge and then Gary from Nerdrotic and stuff, and then, of course Doomcock, and they're very entertaining. They're very, very funny.
They're very entertaining, but you know what's not entertaining?
Star Trek Discovery.
Yes, it is so. It's so, like, the funny thing about it is you look back at episodes of here's what I don't get. Rick Berman produced 25 seasons of Star Trek over 18 years. Yep. He never went over budget.
Yep.
And they would plan on everything, and if you think back to, I'll give you 2 episodes. The penultimate episode of the first season of Deep Space Nine, Duet.
Yes.
And also the second season episode of Next Generation, Measure of a Man.
Yes.
both of those episodes basically take place in one room.
Yeah, bottle episodes. Yeah, absolutely.
They're bottle episodes. They go on to other sets, but most of it takes place in one room.
Yeah.
How in Discovery they'd be like, yeah, man, we're going to do an episode in one room, but it's going to be the size of a football field. And the one room is going to have all kinds of windows that go out in space. So every single shot becomes an effect shot, and the floor is going to have to be polished after each take. And oh my God. I'm like, you guys, Star Trek Discovery is the most, from a production standpoint, if you're making, it is the most ridiculously, it seems like the Saudi Arabians, if Saudi Arabia was producing a Star Trek show, they're like, this is, Star Trek Discovery is going to be, we're going to make it in Dubai. And we're gonna be able to have polished floors. Yep. We can hire as many people as we want. We'll have 21 producers, which they do.
Yes,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We will spare no expense, and we won't. No one will know what they're writing because it doesn't matter.
Right.
It'll just look amazing, and we'll have special effects. And it's just. I look at it and I'm like, who is actually producing this show? Like
right, who's
everything,
running the show? Yeah,
and like when you look at when you think to yourself, like, let's go back to the turbo lifts. How does an elevator work? Like, we want form over function. We have 40 years of Star Trek blueprints.
Yep.
And you've seen we have episodes of Next Generation Disaster where Picard is stuck in a turbo shaft. Where you actually you can even look at Star Trek V. Here's how a turbo shaft works. There isn't like a little track where you can actually see work bees flying inside the ship. Like, what the hell?
Back to your bottle episode points. Let's talk about another series. Babylon 5 had that great where Sheridan is being interrogated by Earth Force or whatever they were called. And again, it was this mental, challenging kind of thing, just like Measure of a Man asked some really important questions, and Duet asked some really important questions, and the episode where Ducat and Sisko are stranded on the planet, and it's after Ducat had his mental breakdown. I mean, you had real acting going on a very limited bunch of sets, and again, going back to Q&A, this short trek, we got number one saying bullshit. We have her teaching Spock how to be a better Vulcan. Pardon me? And it's so sad, Rob, because, again, you've read the novels, too. There have been great novels about Pike's Enterprise. And the great respect that Spock truly had for number one. And all the great Star Trek novelists have really pointed it out. And you get it, and it never diminishes the Spock character the way Spock is diminished in Discovery. And it's like Spock was this smiling dork that needed these women to teach him how to be a better Spock. And I'm sorry, that bothers me, and it has nothing to do with women's superiority over men or trying to... these novels were able to show us a number one that was more than Spock's equal, and that a woman that he truly admired without diminishing his character. But they're incapable of that on Discovery because they're dumb writers, and we get stupid scenes. And it really, and again, coming from Chabon, really disappointed me. There's that great short story of... And it's all just dialogue of Spock and McCoy trapped in some hot room, and I forget one. It was one of the original Trek short story anthologies, and it's McCoy. It's hot in here, and Spock's like hotter than you think because he knows Vulcan, and they have this great exercise going back and forth about, and McCoy postulates some theory about was Spock a Vulcan purposely about or a crossbred thing because the Vulcans wanted to see what would happen if humans and Vulcans were to mate. I mean, and it's this great, and it's totally in character, and it's an interesting intellectual exercise, as these bottle episodes that we've been talking about were. We didn't get any of that, and that's a real missed opportunity. And again, I'm in the hands of a guy like Chabon, and I'm really disappointed because he's smart. He's a smart geek, but not in this episode.
Well, here's my problem. These guys are and Chabon's dabbled in sci-fi concepts before, but what I saw with that Q&A episode is they've infantilized Spock.
Yeah.
You know, they've turned him into he's like Data or something.
Right.
Where,
he's not fully formed yet. Yeah.
With that idea is so stupid. The idea that Spock isn't fully formed. Spock is a badass.
Yes.
He was a badass. He was, and they don't understand that. And we've been getting that since Star Trek 09. Look, all due respect to Zachary Quinto, his portrayal of Spock is horrific. It's so bad, and he's only playing what he's being given.
It's not his fault. He's a great actor, absolutely.
Spock is a character. He's not angry. It's not like what? Did Spock suddenly have to figure out how to be a Vulcan? Like, give me a break. He's gone through Starfleet Academy. The guy is exemplary. He is Ivy League.
Right.
Spock is Ivy League. He's been Ivy League his whole life. He's the smartest, most badass Vulcan ever because he had to be better because he was a half.
100%, and that's the irony. He is Ivy League level, and yet the Vulcans still wouldn't accept him. But go on. I'm sorry.
They write him no offense to community college, but they write him as some community college student who and I watch this. I'm like I look at this. I'm like, this is so insulting.
Yes.
And what's really astonishing to me is they don't know it.
Of course not, Rob, because they think they're doing good work. They are promoting women at the sacrifice of a 50-year-old character. That there's just too many examples of how he is that fly in the face of what they're doing. It's massive disrespect. And again, I mean, hey man, I think we're both mostly liberal, and we want to see and are happy that women are finally getting the movies they deserve and their place and everything, but not at the expense. I mean, it would be, and in fact, they did it in the 4th season of Sherlock, I'm sorry to say, when they introduced his psychotic sister. It's like, no, man, you don't need that. Come on. That's Irene Adler. Yes, that was a beautiful portrayal in the season 2. But that's the thing, man. The destiny, But yeah, go ahead. You can talk about what I just talked about.
Well, no, but I think the irony is the depiction of female characters was far more nuanced and sophisticated, even back into the original series.
Agreed. Yes.
And what's interesting is I hate to say it, but the level of sophistication in the writing, especially in this Q&A episode. Because you know what? Michael Chabon he doesn't understand. Everybody working on Star Trek is slumming. They don't. They all think that they're writing for a show that's it's only Star Trek. You'd think that this stereotype about Star Trek has gone away, but it hasn't. Everybody on the Star Trek writing staff thinks they're better than Star Trek.
I agree.
And like we talk about novels, I mean, my God, if you've read Star Trek novels, as clearly you and I both have, since back into the 70s, even Sandra Marshak and Myrna Culbreth's crazy, The Price of the Phoenix and The Fate of the Phoenix, and their incomprehensible pocket novel Triangle that I've read many times.
I haven't read that one, but okay.
It's nuts. And you read the Prometheus design. Yes. What the fuck was going on? But you read this stuff, and even that, the level of sophistication in these Star Trek novels is so far beyond the scripts for Star Trek Discovery. This Q&A episode, I'm like, this is like what somebody would write in junior high school
100%.
Who just first encountered Star Trek. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, how about the SNL, and I loved it when Patrick Stewart was on and they mashed up Love Boat and Star Trek. And it was, literally like he had Rob Schneider as Data, and he was trying to understand love, and he's like, hey, Captain, here's a chocolate-covered heart. And it was, of course, a human heart. Oh, Data, sure. You have so much to learn about us. And I'm like, dude, that was Rebecca Romaine in Q&A. Good fucking Lord. What has happened to Star Trek? Why is it so stupid? And man, I keep having these conversations with younger people, and they love it. And I'm like, just explain to me why. And again, they're just like, they will be happy to point to individual episodes that, it was a misfire. But again, after, like you said, 18 years and 25 seasons of Star Trek, it's like, okay, but they would tell different stories every week. We've had 29 hours of Discovery. And yeah, nothing but disappointments. I'm sorry. Go ahead now.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, here's the thing that we always have to grapple with. Star Trek is now 53 years old, and there's many people that are coming to Star Trek for the first time, and they're watching Discovery, and many people, unfortunately, in the age of social media, what schools are teaching, the lack of like we all read the classics. You know, you had to read you had to read Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, and Huckleberry Finn. Now people are like, you can't read those books. They use the N-word in them. You know, we have to as if this idea that we're being protected from history by not hearing a certain word that was used. Yep. I mean, you know, human history is a charnel house of horrors.
Yes.
And this idea that we live in a world that is perfection now is just unbelievably silly. So I'm not going to read those books.
Right.
You know, we don't take into consideration. And what's interesting is I own every Star Trek novel. And there are now hundreds and hundreds of them.
Indeed.
And I will tell you, most of them, even the worst ones, are better than any episode of Star Trek Discovery.
Absolutely, man.
And that is a sad state of affairs. It is a sad state of affairs.
Well, especially in this era of smart television. That was the ambition, or at least the hope when they announced Star Trek Discovery. We're all like, maybe we'll get the Breaking Bad of Star Trek, or the Sopranos of Star Trek, or any of these great shows, The Shield. Keep going. I mean, God, even I was just talking to a buddy before we started talking, and that ABC show where the nuclear sub declares independence because they see there's a government conspiracy going on.
Is that the last show?
Yeah, I think they're attaboy, nice going. Yes, Andre Braugher, and it was a great idea, brilliant idea.
By the way, based on a novel.
Of course it was. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, man, and that's why, like you said, this dumbing down of Star Trek that did start with the JJ movies in 2009 and only got worse with subsequent films. And here we are now. Again, they're the keepers of Star Trek. And unfortunately, they're bad. They're bad tenants. They're bad landlords, man. I don't know.
Well, but the thing is, they don't know that they are.
I hear you, and you're right.
And there's so much money involved, and it's like once you get that job and you take it over. And what's really interesting is then they because their original show doesn't work. So hey, let's bring in Captain Pike, let's bring in Spock. And let's bring in it's Spock is a brand, not a character. Absolutely. With them. And you look at it and you're like, do you have any understanding of what this character is all about? Have you watched Star Trek? And I look at these things, I'm like, everybody says they love Star Trek, but have they really watched it? And when I watch Q&A, I'm like, I
know.
Have you ever seen an episode of Star Trek at all? And the stuff they key on, like they'll go back and they'll watch, say, The Cage or The Menagerie, right. And they'll look at a production, something that wasn't fully formed, like Spock smiling when he puts his fingers on the plants,
the vibrating flowers or whatever. Yeah.
And they'll key on that and they'll be like, see, that's a character trait. We're going to explain why he smiled in that one moment.
Right.
And and I'm like, you know what? That's not the moment you should be keying on. That was something they hadn't defined what it is yet. And so you're like, we're going to try and make this canonical and figure it out. I'm like, no.
Wrong way.
That's the last thing. That's just a mistake.
Right.
That's just a mistake.
First season, feeling out different ideas. There's that, well, of course, isn't it, what's it called? Balance of Terror, the Romulan episode from the first season? And they're able to see inside the Romulan ship, and the racist crew member looks at Spock and he smiles, and he's like, or when he's smiling when Uhura is singing, and he's playing his lyre or whatever, his harp, his Vulcan harp. I mean, yeah, man. Again, it's like, no, this is first season, like feeling shit out, and again, but you're right. They're like, oh no, there's a mystery here, and it's like, good Lord, you can't even like come up with something interesting and original. No, clearly not.
No. And what's worse is they're going to be like, we're going to explain why Spock smiled in this moment. And it's like, no, you guys, that's not what
we don't want it.
to be explained.
Yeah. Jesus.
That's not it.
No. Did you see tonight's new short trek?
No, I haven't watched it yet, but I will say this.
I'm not going to spoil, but I cannot wait because you saw the trailer, obviously.
Yeah, like they're murdering tribbles. They're shooting tribbles.
Well, and also, it's happening on a starship, and this isn't spoiling anything. So when the trouble with tribbles happened, why didn't they look in their library databanks and say, 10 years earlier? Because again, they keep, Rob, as you know, they keep the Discovery producers keep telling us how, oh no, we love canon. We're very serious about canon. Bullshit. I'm sorry, that's not true. Oh. You're making it your own thing, and you think it's great, but you're, like you said, you're filling in blanks that no one asked for. And also, by the way, you should never make something and give the people what they want. You give them what they need, and you should be smart enough to know, okay, you can put some member berries in there, and that's fine. And then, of course, we all get excited, and man, Star Trek Picard filled with them. I love that trailer, and we'll talk about that in a sec if you've still got time. But, yeah, man. But again, it's like, man, like you said, good Lord. And I'm really glad on, by the way, Inglorious Trexperts, and let me plug the show that you appear on so often with Mark Altman and Darren Dockerman. You guys have been celebrating the 50th anniversary of Star Trek The Motion Picture, or 40th?
40th,
excuse me. And you're right, man. I mean, I agree with you. And I loved the director version that Wise did in the early 2000s, and I'm glad he was alive to do it. I love Robert Wise. I really do. I think he's a very underrated filmmaker. Because, like, my buddy Gabe Hardman, who's a big, he does a lot of Hollywood work. He always thinks that.
Yeah, Gabriel Hardman's actually in my documentary for Superman Returns.
Oh, my God, I didn't realize that. That's fantastic.
He's in the very beginning of my Requiem for Krypton documentary because he was one of the first people hired in the art department to do artwork by Guy Dias.
Well, and he created that the space shuttle sequence or whatever, that whole, which I love. But yeah, Gabe's always like, Robert Wise. And I'm like, dude, Robert Wise, from The Sound of Music to the setup, and of course, being a great film editor, but Day the Earth Stood Still, and I'm like, that guy could do any goddamn genre and do a great job with it. I'm like, he's amazing. But anyway, back to the movie, Star Trek The Motion Picture. You're right, man. It is a high-minded film that absolutely is Star Trek. And they are, and granted it's familiar territory to Nomad and other things where Kirk Landru, the computer, where Kirk outwits the artificial intelligence in some way. But as you know, too, the core of Spock's character changing. There are so many great ideas and things they explore in Star Trek The Motion Picture. And again, it deserves its recognition. I'm glad it was back in theaters. I'm glad it's getting the 4K treatment. It deserves all of this, and it deserves the accolades. And yeah, I mean, it was a bold, interesting step that was very much still in the flavor of Star Trek, unlike Discovery.
Right. And what's interesting is what I find strange, and I just don't get this. There's so much Star Trek available, whether it's in comic form, whether it's in novel form, whether it's the hundreds of episodes of Star Trek, the 13 feature films, 10 of them are canon. And you look at this stuff, and it's not rocket science why Star Trek works. And I feel that since 2009, we've been given Star Trek that's being written, and no offense to my mother, but by people that understand the way my mom understands Star Trek.
Well, that's the masses, as opposed to the hardcore fans. But go on.
Absolutely. And my mom has known I'm a hardcore Star Trek fan my whole life, but my mother's, her rudimentary understanding of Spock, he doesn't have emotions or whatever, is exactly the way he was written in Star Trek 09.
Yep.
There's and directed by J.J. Abrams, who during the time when it came out said, whoever asked, I never liked Star Trek. It was not my favorite thing. I'm like, then why the fuck are you directing it, dude? And by the way, why would anyone hire you to direct it?
Well, I get why they hired him, because he.
Well, no, I
you
get
do too, man. I mean, Mission Impossible 3 was such a great 180 and really saved that franchise, because 2 was so annoying, and that's a disappointment with John Woo. But what are you going to do?
Yeah, but Star Trek is. It's funny. I often talk about how Peter Weir's film Master and Commander which is based on those novels.
Yes.
It's like you look at Master and Commander, I'm like, if you want to know what modern Star Trek can be like, look at Master and Commander. And people are like, what does that mean? That's a period piece about ships and Napoleonic Wars. And I'm like, all right, you're not getting what I'm saying. I'm telling you metaphorically, if you want to look at something that's good Star Trek in the modern age, look at Master and Commander. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you guys aren't getting it, it's like they're looking at Gold Key Star Trek comics and they're going, that's Star Trek. That's exactly how it should be. I mean, yeah, because the Gold Key Star Trek comics, drawn by artists who had never seen the show, that's the gold. Yeah, that's the gold standard. There's a giant man-eating plant. We're going to make Star Trek like that. We're going to have, the spore drive. We're going to actually literally be able to go through the looking glass, but we're going to be able to use our propulsion system to do so. It's so weird. Like they're not understanding. Like I'm like, how is it you're writing like that Q&A story? It's 15 minutes. Michael Chabon should know better.
It's 12 minutes.
12 minutes. I'm like, bruh. I mean, dude. You could rip off Point Break and it would make a better episode of Star Trek than what you just showed me. What you showed me is basically you're showing me a nerdy kid. You're showing me a story about Spock who's in junior high school, who's in an elevator with the most popular girl in high school that he wants to get to, and the conversation they're having. I mean, that's literally what you're watching.
Yeah.
You're watching a story about a nerdy high school or junior high school kid who meets. It's like super bad.
Well, it's or a senior. It's like a freshman meeting is like the hottest senior that he ever saw or whatever, and she is, It's Degrassi. It's Degrassi Trek.
It's Degrassi Trek, and you know what? Degrassi Trek would be better because it wouldn't be so heavy-handed, didactic, and fucking stupid.
Rob, I know so many people we know are now involved in Star Trek, and I am just praying that the stuff they're going to make is going to be good. I'm not going to name names.
Well, the problem is, I think the problem is that when you have somebody like Akiva Goldsman who can slap his Oscar on a table every time you disagree with what he says, he's like, you know what? I want to have two women walking through the desert making a Starfleet symbol in the sand, even though there's a sandstorm coming. And if anyone's ever been in the desert, and you walk 5 feet away from where you were, there's no longer footprints because the sand has been blown away. But no, we're going to be able to build a giant Starfleet symbol to the point where our ship is going to see it from orbit and be able to come pick us up.
Rob, I cannot wait. I can't wait for you to see this second episode. Your head's going to explode.
Dude.
I'm telling you, man. And honestly, and as I'm sure you feel the same way, every time, hey, there's going to be a new Star Trek episode. Great. Please get it right this time. Please get it right this time.
I feel that way.
And it's with optimism and hope, truly.
But I look at this, and what's really interesting to me, the thing that fascinates me as a filmmaker myself, who sits in edit bays and tries to figure out the logic of everything. Sure. I look at this stuff and I think to myself, honestly, I'm like, how is this stuff so dumb?
Yeah.
Like we talk about Degrassi, how do you not know that Rebecca Romaine is like the hot girl in whatever John Hughes movie you're looking at? And Spock is like Jonah Hill in Superbad
John
or
Cryer.
whatever.
He's
John
Ducky Spock.
He's Ducky. Oh man, that's it. He's Ducky Spock, and there's what's her face? Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, there we go.
And we're together, and we're stuck in the elevator, and we're having this conversation, and I'm like, Spock is a badass. If I had written that episode, Spock would have ensorcelled her. Spock would have been so magnetic and charming and interesting and such a raconteur, not knowing he was that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And she would have been completely blown away by him.
Because I could see him still being, outside of Amanda, his mother, not used to other species yet, and still being
he was in Starfleet.
Well, that's true. Oh, you're right about that. That's very true.
And you know what?
Yeah.
What would have been really interesting is he would have been so charming and so disarming And so, like, look, why did women love Spock when Star Trek was originally on TV? Why did why did he become a sex symbol?
Because he was an enigmatic mystery.
Yes. And the fact is, if you played him as a badass, as this guy, and what was really funny, the way you should have played it is he, according to her, is like this ladies' man. He is charismatic, but he's also, like you said, enigmatic, and he's just totally magnetic, and he's just come on, and she would have been like, she's like, oh my God, I find this man so attractive, but I know he's a Vulcan. I don't know what's up. And he would have completely disarmed her. He didn't even know he was doing it because he's just being himself. And she would have been completely a putty in his arms by the end.
That's funny.
Because that would have been interesting.
But you see, I see it more as a chess match. Again, them coming from these very highly intellectual points of view that are still different. And that could intrigue them on a very basic level as well. But I really did see it more as, like I said, again, I think it was Vulcan Glory or Vulcan's Glory.
Yeah, it was. That was Dorothy Fontana wrote that book.
Yep. And it's one of the listeners, obviously Rob and I know what we're talking about, but totally worth finding, either used or see if it's on Amazon or whatever. It's a great Pike story and Pike's Enterprise, and it goes back to the time of the Cajun, the Menagerie reruns, obviously, but also talks about Pike on Talos 4 after the events of the Menagerie with Vina, and it's great. It's amazing, and you really do.
It's infinitely better than what they wrote in the second season of Discovery.
Yeah, and really that is my one. And I still have a lot of flaws, and I think we might have even talked about it. The Talos 4 episode, I really appreciated the conversations that Vina and Pike had. That was really the highlight of that episode. But there was a lot of bullshit, and one of the things, and I know it drove you nuts too, they made the Telosians basketball tall, as opposed to the original design where you use those little old ladies with such makeup. I mean, one of them is like an extra on Mayberry all the time. The main one, in fact. And the idea that
Meg Wiley.
There you go, Meg Riley is her name. Fantastic. And as you know, the idea was the Telosians have used their minds and their bodies have atrophied and have devolved so much that they're these little emaciated little husks of humanoids. And again, instead we get the Houston Rockets front three, and I'm like, what the hell's going on, man?
Well, it shows that there's just a fundamental at the very top. There's a complete fundamental lack of understanding of what they're doing. They don't even get it. They don't understand that. And if you were to tell them, you're like, there's a reason they cast women in these roles in the first place. Like, I'm sure they'd be like, wait a minute, those were women? Yeah.
But they didn't sound like women, Rob. What do you mean?
It's so. I would love to say, like, there's a couple of books that have been written on the making of Star Trek. There might even be a few behind the scenes books, and there's some art books and maybe some blueprints even. Yeah. Like, why don't you? I wish they would have like a retreat where they had to take like Star Trek boot camp. As a matter of fact, I'll volunteer, John. I will teach Star Trek boot camp. I will. I'll be like, hey, I got an idea. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take you to Star Trek boot camp. It's going to be I won't even charge very much.
You're going to be the Army.
I'll bring in my own books.
What was that guy's name from Full Metal Jacket, the sergeant?
Gunnery Sergeant.
Oh, no, not the actor, Emery or whatever. Ely Emery.
Oh, F. Murray. No, Arlie
Ermy. That's his name. Absolutely. You will like Star Trek, and you will understand it when you are done, soldier. It's like, all right.
Yeah. What is your major malfunction? How could you have written this script? Did you not read anything I showed you?
Should we get into Picard? Do you have time to talk about the Picard trip?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I liked it a lot, and I get from your YouTubes that you liked it as well. I also appreciate some of the fan theories. I try to stay away from fan theories, Rob. God, everyone was trying to second guess Endgame for that entire fucking year, and I'm like, can I just like watch the movie and not hear what you guys think it's going to be? Because I'm like, whatever you think it's going to be, it's not going to be what we get on the screen. And I was obviously very pleased with what we got in Endgame. So Picard,
I loved it.
Yeah, Oh God, Endgame was amazing, man. Yeah, it was such a such a beautiful wrap up to that saga. I mean, good Lord, and a real fast aside, when people were complaining when they announced that Feige was going to direct a Star Wars movie, oh, another white man's going to direct Star Wars. It's like the guy's movies make between $800 million and $1 billion. Shut the fuck up. I don't care. He's a white guy. He's the guy that makes money. Green is the dominant color, and they're not dummies. And thank God. Someone had that conversation, whether it was Feige telling Alan Horn or going to, I forget her name, but your Star Wars current
Kathleen Kennedy.
Kennedy, of course. Shame on me. Yes. I mean, whatever made that happen, that's fantastic. And it's like, no, this isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing. Shut the fuck up and enjoy the movie.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we live in such a weird time where it's very funny. Like, here's what I don't understand. I am not LeBron James. I am not created equal to LeBron James. He is a much better basketball player than I will ever be.
As we saw in Free Enterprise, no offense.
Oh, yeah. He's handsome. He's more handsome, and he's taller, and he's much more athletically inclined than I am. So I have no problem saying that in no way, shape, or form, in any universe, will LeBron James and I be equal on the basketball field, on the court. We just won't be. Now, if I were to say that about any other thing, like if I were to say, like, okay, say whatever it is, human beings are not equal when it comes to ability. Everybody has different gifts. And Kirk even says that in Star Trek 2. Or Spock says it. Each according to his gifts. Or her gifts. Now, that doesn't mean we all shouldn't have the opportunity to try and do whatever we want. Nobody, based on their shape, size, color, creed, gender, religious belief, sexuality, whatever. Nobody should be limited to pursue their dreams based on any of those things. But I will never be able to be allowed in the NBA to play on an NBA team, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I want it. I'm just not going to be able to make that team. And that's okay. That's not something that's in my life or in my future, and I need to come to grips with it. So this idea that everybody is somehow equal is weird to me. It's a bizarre idea.
It's Harrison Burt I can't remember. Bergeron. There you go. Yeah, for the Vonnegut novella or whatever. I mean, goddamn, yeah, man. No, we're living in it.
We're living in it, and it's so weird to me. Like, I have to tell you, John, I'm okay with not being LeBron James. Would I like to have his bankroll? Would I like to make as much money as he has? I mean, he's even been in movies I would like to be in. But the fact is, I'm just not him. And, I wouldn't want to be on a team where people are like, Bob, Robert, whatever you prefer, you can try really hard. But you just try hard and you can be on the team. But they would keep me benched, and I would never be able to play, and they wouldn't want to hurt my feelings. And nobody would ever say, you're never going to play on an NBA team. Just sit here on the bench, and we'll keep those dreams of yours alive. I mean, it's so bizarre that we live in that world. And I feel that, like, once you get into writing for television, you just get to stick around. Like, no one ever goes, maybe this isn't a good fit. Maybe this isn't the show you should write on. No, instead, everyone's like, hey, man, you're my friend. Let's come in here. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. And so we're getting a lot of really mediocre writing because nobody wants to step up and go, yeah, I don't want to tell you you're not good at this because I don't want to hurt your feelings. And by the way, you have a contract and you're on payroll and, you're making how many tens of thousands of dollars it's so weird. And then at the end, someone's like, you spent how many millions of dollars making this episode? And nobody ever stops to think, It's like the old Jeff Goldblum. It's Ian Malcolm. Just because you could do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Well, and also, we didn't talk about the Mosley thing, and obviously we each talked about it on our respective podcasts and YouTube channels, but, man, what a missed opportunity. I mean, we don't have to rehash everything, but it really is. And also, it's very insulting because I watched the panels from the Star Trek Las Vegas convention, and there was that one great panel where they had all the living actors that were doctors. And no offense to Wilson Cruz, who plays Dr. Culver on Discovery, but when they went down the line of what, do you think your show represents best, and he said diversity, it's like, well, I'm sorry, man, but it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And inclusion, I think he also said, diversity and inclusion. It's like, where was the inclusion for Walter Mosley? A guy that, good Lord, what a missed opportunity. And like you said, I'm sure he was like, oh yeah, Star Trek, that'll be fun. What the hell? And then got all that grief. Right. It's like, fuck you, man. And I was so pleased that it was that just matter of fact of, I don't need this. I'm fucking, Walter Mosley. I don't need this bullshit. And he's right.
By the way, the inclusion in Star Trek Discovery is superficial at best. It is not true inclusion at all. As a matter of fact, it is the most pandering, horrifically portrayed. I mean, if you want to show a relationship between two men, and you have a scene where you're showing, it's a gay relationship, so they're going to show, they'll be brushing their teeth together in the morning. It is the most insulting, superficial examples of this, and it's horrifically awful, and it does a disservice to everyone.
Or the disabled, that one long shot on the corridor, and you see a crew member wheel by in a wheelchair, and it's like, wait a minute, Cyber Robot Girl, whose funeral was like 3 times the length of Spock's funeral in Star Trek II, she has cybernetic legs. Why doesn't wheelchair crew member? And again, it's like, it's pandering. It's pandering. And no offense to any, physically challenged people that are listening, and I don't mean any disrespect, obviously, to people that have to live with that. But it's like, whereas Geordi, a blind man, was given a visor, and it's like, okay, he can see. And that's great. And it's like, again, Discovery just doesn't. They're hey man, we're with you. Look, you're there. You're there too. And it's like, well, yeah, sure they are, but they probably have cybernetic legs. Go on.
Yeah, the idea that somebody's going to be out on the final frontier in a wheelchair.
Yeah, come on.
Like, are you kidding me?
How's that in the moon? How's that with the moon buggies and the moon marauders?
I mean, especially in the 23rd century. I mean, you'd be in an exoskeleton if your legs didn't work and they needed you on the ship. You'd be in an exoskeleton. It is to show somebody on a starship in a wheelchair. That is the worst kind of representation. Pandering. That is not science fiction. That is pandering. That is you trying to make yourself feel better. It's like, also, people in wheelchairs would be like, why would someone people who are in wheelchairs, you know what they don't want to be in? Wheelchairs. And the idea that in the 23rd century with all of this technology, you're going to show somebody in a wheelchair on a starship? People in wheelchairs are going to be like, that's bullshit. No, that would never happen.
They just showed last night on MeTV, ironically, the episode where Worf has the spine injury and wants.
And he wants to die.
But again, Crusher and the other doctor have those exo straps that they put on him, and he's like, "Move your leg." Yeah. And he's like, "No, that's good. That's great. I don't want to live like this." And you'll get 70% of your mobility left. And oh my God, again. A very interesting idea of what do you do when this man or even the David Ogden Stiers episode of Next Generation with Waxana Troy, and his society deems that after a certain age you're going to die. I mean, that's a really good episode. These are lofty, ambitious ideas, and all we get on Star Trek Discovery is pandering, and Michael Burnham is the center of the universe, and the solution not only the solution to every problem. The reason for every problem, as Cybergirl says before she dies. It's all about you, Michael. Of course it is. It's fucking Star Trek Discovery. And I was okay with a one-character-centered Star Trek that might be intriguing. And I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. But not, dare I say, Rob, Mary Sue. She's a fucking Mary Sue. And I hate to use that word. And I know people cringe when they hear that word. And I know it upsets people. But how else do you describe the miracle cure-all, the insubordinate crew member that how the fuck is she in Star Starfleet. She says no, Captain, more than good morning, Captain. And I'm just amazed. Or that one scene near the end of season 2 where she and Tig Notaro's character are like running. No disrespect, sir. Too late.
And what's interesting to me is it's just bad fiction. Yep. We live in a world where there is so much great stuff all over the place. Everywhere. There's great television, there's great movies, there's great comics, there's great novels. There's so much good stuff. And Star Trek's been around for over 50 years. We should be getting sonnets.
Yes.
We should be getting operas. We should be getting epic poetry in the form of Star Trek. And yet we are getting the basest, most pandering, most horribly written science fiction ever.
Woof.
And it's really fucking bad.
Yeah, it's depressing, man. Because, again, it's that feeling. And it's so funny, Rob, because I love, again, on Inglourious Treksperts, when you guys talk about the original cast's movies and the next-gen movies and stuff. And, you know, I'll admit it, for all its flaws, I love Star Trek 3. It cracks me. I love them stealing the Enterprise and everything. But you're right, man. They're on cheap sound stages, and it's a very cheap-looking movie. But I just growing up with 70s Doctor Who, I can look beyond all that and appreciate the story.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess my problem is, after seeing Star Trek, the motion picture, and Star Trek 2, look, again, it's all down to Leonard Nimoy's inexperience as a director.
Fair enough.
And I, again, as I've learned, I mean, even in the Blu-rays that I produced for Star Trek: The Next Generation, any actor that's in a show that becomes a hit, he or she will never understand what it's like to be an audience member who loves that show. They can't. They're too far in it. Like Brent Spiner told me when I was interviewing him, and we sit down. Brent Spiner, he said to me, he goes, you know, I've never seen an episode of Next Generation. I'm like, come on. He goes, no, the only episodes I've seen were the movies, and that was because I was contractually obligated to go to the premieres. He's like, why would I watch a Star Trek episode that I was in? And if you think about it, Brent Spiner really, his performance, while great, he's basically doing the same thing for 178 episodes. Yeah. And as an actor, all actors, by the way, especially an actor on a show like Star Trek, they all think they're destined for something better.
Hilarious.
They all do. And I don't blame them. I mean, I completely understand where they're coming from. There's no shame in that, because if you're Brent Spiner and you're playing Data, you basically have to talk and be the same way for a long period of time, for 7 years. Yeah. And it's not like you're ever going to have a great death scene, or you're ever going to have a scene. Well, he did have a scene with his daughter.
Yes.
Which is great.
I love that episode. Yes, lol.
Yeah, the Offspring. Yes. And Brent Spiner even said, he had a lot of great stuff to do. And he talked about how grateful he was to play Data. And he was great in the role. But I get it. He's not sitting at home going, wow, can you believe they brought Denise Crosby back? And in yesterday's Enterprise, she went back to the Rift and she became her own daughter's mother with Sela, and they brought her back in Unification. If I were to talk about what happened with Denise Crosby's character and Sela, and if I mentioned that to Brent Spiner, he'd be like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Well, when Denise Crosby, when she was in the alternate universe in the third season episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, and she went back through the Rift with the Enterprise C, and she was actually at the Battle of Narendra 3, and then she was captured and became a consort, and she had a baby. He would look at me going, I don't know what the fuck you were talking about.
Because it was 1 week and 7 years of work. I understand. Yeah, man. No.
Yeah, and he didn't even see those scenes.
That's
He's shooting his
That's
scenes.
A good point.
So it's like he's like, wait a minute, like when he doesn't even know why Denise Crosby came back in Unification.
That's true.
Why was he
or
like in the Klingon?
For that matter, maybe.
Yeah, or Redemption 1 or 2. Like, what does that mean? He doesn't know. And if I were to sit down and when I interviewed Patrick Stewart, I interviewed him twice for like hours at a time. If I was going to talk to him about Sela, he would say to me, Rob, hello, who is Sela? I don't know. Celia, he's like, Denise Crosby coming back. Is that when she wore the wig? Yeah, that's terrible.
I loved when you were able to bond with him about I, Claudius, and he shows up with his makeup or hair person.
Oh my God. Yeah, that was on the set of X-Men too.
That's fantastic, man.
That was when I first met him.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but can you imagine if I tried to explain,
yes.
like, wasn't it cool when Celia shows up and Patrick would be like, what are you talking
Rob,
about?
That's why I've given up doing actor press junkets. And I could have done it in Portland for Rose City because it's Rucka's hometown. So they had a huge Stumptown presentation. Kobe Smulders wasn't there, but the rest of the cast was. And I'm just like, I don't need to talk to actors because actors are not the keepers of character. Writers are. Showrunners are.
Right.
And that's
100%.
the kind of stuff. And that's why I love having Guggenheim on and Mark Miller when he shows up every few years and various people, and I can really talk to them, and of course all the comic book writers, because they're the keepers of character. They understand. It's the Ron Moores can go on for hours about the complexities of the Klingon Empire, and that's what you want to hear as a fan. That's what you're looking for, and I get the eye candy appeal of, oh my God, I can't believe I just met George Takei, and he's a lovely man, and he was. I met him at a con when he was doing Heroes. And we're all like, George, that's fantastic, man. Look at you kicking ass in something brand new. Yes, thank you. Okay. And Frakes was hilarious at his show and telling us stories when he was Captain America for Marvel and would do public appearances. And he would be backstage at a Blood, Sweat, and Tears concert, and we were all cracking up. They're great. Marina Sirtis is such a funny woman, and when she does her panels, she's great. But if you really want to know about Deanna Troi, talk to Melissa Snodgrass. Talk to all these great writers that have been writing Star Trek for those years. Because, again, they know the characters. They understand the nuances. And even in these shows where they stayed the same for 7 years, they were able to give us flavors of character for moments that Brent Spiner may not remember. But, we know the beauty of, was it Brothers when he meets Noonien Sun and Laura comes back.
Yeah, and he's playing three roles.
And oh my God, I can't grieve for you, Father. You will in your own way. I mean, it's beautiful moments, man. Or of course the Inner Light and all the great. And I know that's an exception that I think Patrick Stewart does understand.
Right, but what's interesting about Inner Light is as a story, he doesn't have to know anything about canonical Star Trek. True. He understands the concept of that story is there's a long dead race that sent out a probe and sought him out and found him, and so basically he's the keeper of this flame, and it's easy to understand that story is universal. You understand that without having to know anything about canon.
But it does tell us a lot about Star Trek. It does tell us a lot about Picard. And
absolutely. And
go ahead, buddy.
Well, what I was going to say about Star Trek Picard, and you can see this clearly if you've read, you can find it online. Michael Piller wrote a really interesting book that was never officially published, and if you read it, you can see why.
That's the Star Trek Insurrection book? Go on.
Yes, and he wrote a book about writing Star Trek Insurrection, and there was a lot of input from Patrick Stewart and all of that, and it's not that it's unflattering. But the idea here's my thing. I love actors. Actors are amazing. Sure. But actors, especially when you have a show that has such deep canon like Star Trek, actors are thinking about their character in terms of the world they live in themselves and what they understand. Mm-hmm. So when you bring in a Patrick Stewart to talk about, well, how would you feel about an aging Picard? What he's going to tell you is he's going to apply aging in his own life. Now, that has nothing to do with canonical Star Trek. So when an actor comes in like Patrick Stewart, he's an executive producer of Picard, they buy off on him, he's going to have a lot of sway, but what he wants to see is the story that he understands, which is how's it been like for him to age? Right. He's not going, well, let me think about canonical Captain Picard. What would happen with Patrick Stewart? Like, he doesn't know what. If you were to ask Patrick Stewart about, like, what did you think when Damon Bach brought back the Stargazer? What was it like for you? He'd be like, what? I mean, yeah, the Stargazer, that was my first ship, right? Yeah, but when Damon Bach brought it back and you used the Picard maneuver and all that, he'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
I'd be amazed if he knew about the Stargazer, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, it's the kind of thing, well, but that's how it is. And it's like, when he's working on the Picard show, what he wants to tell a story about, in his life, it's a Grail quest. I don't even know what the show's fucking about. But you've got this Dodge girl who, it's a Grail quest. It's a story. A young girl's in trouble, and old Captain Picard needs to help her, even if she's the offspring of himself and the Borg Queen, whoever the hell she turns out to be. Yeah, I do too. I thought,
dude, I wouldn't have known about it if you hadn't talked about it, and I immediately went to that YouTube.
Oh, it's great. I'm like,
that's a brilliant idea.
Like, that video is way better than the show's going to be. They put way more thought into what's happening. Like, when I watched that Popcast video about look who this girl is. It's Picard's daughter. See how it is. And I watch that video. I'm like, I like those guys. I'm like, this is way more thought out than anything that's happened in this show.
YouTube? Because we should direct people to it. Say it again.
Yeah, it's the Popcast.
There you go.
And I don't remember the exact title. It's like, it's Captain Picard's daughter. Find out how, or something like that.
Star Trek Picard Explained, or something like that. But man, no. Honestly, it's 12 minutes long. And if you love, and obviously you do because you're still listening to us talk about Star Trek and all the things that are wrong with current Star Trek. But seriously, man, it is genius shit. And I hope it's somebody that is, got real dope from the writer's room, because that would be amazing, and it would really tie things in so well with canon. But as you say, the suspicion is that they are thinking a lot more about Star Trek in positive, connective ways than the current keepers of Star Trek.
What was so funny about that video is it talks about, like, I've always thought, how did they clone Shinzon for Nemesis? When did they go back and watch? They have this great... What they do is they tie in Nemesis, they tie in Yesterday's Enterprise, they tie in all of this stuff, all the Borg episodes, and I'm like, they have clearly spent way more time figuring this out in terms of Star Trek canon. And I'm like, wow, if this was all true and they were able to pull this off, I'm like, that would be awesome.
Oh, yes.
It would. They have no. Although I will say this, they do have Kirsten Beyer, who's a great Star Trek novelist.
Yes, indeed, I completely agree.
And she, to me, it's exactly the kind of thing a good Star Trek novelist would come up with. But I can only imagine her pitching all of these ideas to Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman. They're going like, wait, what?
Nah, I don't think so. It's too complicated.
Are you telling me that Denise Crosby's character went back in time through a time rift, but wasn't she dead by the third season? And wait a minute, she was supposed to have told the Romulan High Command about Picard before he was even what? I mean, can you imagine? I watched that video and I'm like, oh, boys, if you only knew what it was like to write a TV show.
But, Rob, we do have things like Wise Guy and other great, in this second golden age of television shows, that do make a difference. The member berries that they gave us in the Picard trailer, I can't deny. I had the happy feelies watching it and everything, and that's great. And I agree with you, man. The likelihood is there might be some of it, because really it does make sense that is her name Dodge, the girl that
Dodge,
the girl that's in trouble. I mean, the fact that we see that something's going on with the Romulans and the Borg. It is possible that she is they did take Picard's DNA, and that it would be a masterstroke if they take it all the way back to Sela's, mother, and obviously, Denise Crosby going back, Tasha Yar, but also, like you said, the idea of, oh no, we need to clone Picard, and therefore there's Shinzon. And it's wonderful. My God, it really, I mean, again, this is something that Arthur Schmecker, whatever the hell his name was, Joker might be thinking of while he's sitting in Arkham or whatever. I mean, it's beautiful, man. And again, us Star Trek fiends are like, oh, what a great idea. And I hope it's true.
Oh,
I hope 50% of what they thought of is true.
Yeah, I mean, I when I was watching this, I'm like, I wish all of this 100%. Is true. But then I'm watching it, and I'm just like, I know it's all based on the Countdown comic that is considered canonical, which came. I have the hardcover.
Oh wow! I have it. I'll confess, I didn't buy it originally, but I did get it on my Kindle when they made the announcement that Countdown is in canon and everything. And I'm like, hey, let me read that story. And I'm like, and I heard, it's a pretty good Next Generation Spock story. And it's like, all right.
Yeah, I know. I mean, at the time, I'm like, well, this is way better than the actual script for Star Trek 09 was.
Obviously, Gilbert agrees.
Yeah, Gilbert is, I don't know why he's barking. But I guess I should probably go.
Buddy, yeah, by all means, man. But yeah, and again, I appreciate the time, Rob. We've gone over 2 hours, but it's always great talking to you, and obviously you heard me cackling. I appreciate your point of view, man. It's always fun. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate it. I love your show, and I love what you've been doing for years and years. It's fantastic, and I want to thank you for the support on my own channel on YouTube at the Burnett Work. So thank you for that,
buddy. And let's do this again soon. I'm sure we'll have things to talk. And dude, I cannot wait for your YouTube. Robservations, everybody, go to Rob's YouTube channel. And I know when he sees H. John Benjamin in the second short trek. Man, I'll tell you, put a tarp down when you see the show, Rob, because your head's going to explode just like Scanners. It's not going to be pretty. Man. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship. I feel like watching Star Trek Discovery that I'm subjecting myself to a horrible psychological experience every time I watch it because I want it to be good.
Yeah.
Every time I'm like, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and then you come back and you just beat me up. I feel that's what it's like. I mean, I know, and I don't mean to make light of anybody who's in a bad domestic situation. I don't mean to do that, But sometimes I do feel like I need to just. I need to get a spoon and scoop out my eyeballs and eat them or cook them up so I just don't have to see anymore.
And yet we come back every week hoping for the best, and that's the truth, man. We are disgusted optimists that hopefully, again, because one episode, one series, one movie, it all goes away. As bad as Batman and Robin were, Chris Nolan comes back with Batman Returns, Era Begins. And yeah, everything is great again. So I never say die, and we're all positive. But anyway, and maybe we'll talk after the CW Crisis crossover. And my God,
which I mean, it just looks delightful. Yes. I mean, everything they've done, the excitement they've generated, those are people that understand. I mean, canon. They get it,
and very quickly. I've been told by people who write for the show that there was always this is the direction they always wanted to go with as far as the crossovers, and it was network pushback until the last two, where they're like, "Oh, now we get it. Yeah, that's a good idea. You guys go ahead and do what you need to." And especially with Arrow wrapping up and everything, I mean, all the shots of all the actors on set have been amazing. So yeah, and again,
by the way,
they're in good hands. Writing.
I have a friend. I can't say who. That's high up on one of the CW shows, an EP. Okay. He was telling me a year ago that they were going to try and do this and who they were trying to get. And I was like, bruh, come on, dude. There is no way you're going to pull that off. And I would say it's about 80% of what he told me. That's
hilarious. Yeah, I had a conversation as well with one of the writers. Go on.
And yeah, isn't it delightful that on one hand you can look at the CW shows and know that they're doing this kind of coolness, and then you look back and I'm like, wow, they're doing Lower Decks and they're doing a Nickelodeon show and we're going to do a Section 30. First of all, by doing a Section 31 television show, you've ruined the idea of Section 31.
Yeah.
By doing a show and demystifying Section 31, you've wrecked Section 31. Man. And they don't get it.
No, they don't.
Why isn't the real Section 31 showing up going, you know what, we're not going to allow this TV show.
Fire.
Like if I would do a Section 31 show, I would do a reality show about the making of Section 31 and how the real Section 31 showed up on the first day of shooting and like, you don't really think we're going to let you do this, dude.
Sloane's son.
Yeah, or just get Bill Sadler to show up, and Dulmer and Luxley from the Department of Temporal Investigations. They show up, and like Bill Sadler just shows up on the set with that rad leather jacket,
exactly the black
and
jacket.
He's looking at Michelle Yeoh, and he's like, "You're not you're not going to be shooting this show.
Or Ensign Daniels comes back from the future and goes, yeah, listen, we've known for a couple hundred years. This is a big fucking mistake. We're really sorry.
Yeah, and
but it had to
you're
happen.
Not making the show. Yeah. I mean, it's. I would actually watch that. I'd watch. They should make a show about. They're making a Section 31 show, and just Bill Sadler shows up or Daniels shows up, and they can't make the show, and it becomes like the player for
Hilarious.
Star Trek. It's like Robert Altman's the player, and the studio's like, "What do you mean you're not shooting?" Well, a guy who looks like Bill Sadler showed up, but he says he's not Bill Sadler. And they're like, no, Bill Sadler's back east shooting something else. Well, he looks just like Bill Sadler, and he says we can't shoot. I mean, that would be funny. Like, I'd watch that show.
Man. Jesus Christ. All right, go tend to the dogs, and as always, thank you for your time, buddy.
All right, man, this was great. I love talking to you.
There you go, Robert Meyer Burnett. Go to his website, Robservations. Also, check out his YouTube channel as well, Robservations. Really funny stuff. He's almost daily with his look at the pop culture world and his opinions. He talks about everything, man. Star Wars. Man, we didn't even really get into, was it Jennifer Aniston today that kind of joined the chorus of how she kind of hates the superhero movies and how they've messed up the movie business? I think the movie business has messed up the movie business, frankly. And I think, unfortunately, and it's a conversation I've had with others, and Rob has said this as well, and I've even said this on Rob's YouTube show when I've submitted my questions to him. Hollywood is eliminating the mid-level movie because the playing field for those things has moved to streaming. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Again, the convenience of streaming and cable and movies on demand have made not needing to go to the theater for some of these more quiet films. The popcorn movies survive because they need to be experienced on a gigantic screen. Do you really need to see, Book Club in Cinerama? I don't think so. So, again, taking nothing away from the movie or Late Night or any of these other recent films. You'll notice I'm picking on films that Amazon helped co-finance. But even City by the Sea. Manchester by the Sea. The Oscar-winning film that Casey Affleck was in a couple of years ago. I don't know, I'm shrugging. But again, Rob talks about everything that's going on, and he reviews movies, and he reviews TV. He gets very interesting questions from his followers, the post-geek singularity, as Rob likes to call it. It's always a fun time listening to Rob rant on YouTube, and that's why I'm a fan. And also, as you know, I've enjoyed his work over the years. And I always feel like Josh Wayskin from Searching for Bobby Fischer to Rob's... I'm not going to call him Bobby Fischer because he was a whack job. Let's call Rob Gary Kasparov. And as much as I think I'm a decent Trek expert, I can't hold a candle to Rob. And I love that, again, we can speak the same language and have a great conversation. So I hope you enjoyed it today. It was all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, for your support via Patreon. Come over to Word Balloon's front page, wordballoon.com. You can click on the Patreon ad there, or go directly to my site on Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. You'll find my page there. Thank you greatly for your subscription support to the League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Now, in the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to Aftershock creators about their books. I hope to be talking to Joe Pruitt soon about Shock, his great anthology, and also his editorial philosophy and what he's trying to achieve with Aftershock. But I'm telling you, man, some of my favorite people are at Aftershock creating books. Hell, a couple of years ago, Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso even did American Monster. There's been other great books like... Marguerite Bennett's Animosity and A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis, and Dark Red from Tim Seeley, and Stronghold from Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, just to name a few. You Are Not Obsolete, Matthew Klickstein. Cullen Bunn has Night Temporal currently, but also great things like The Brothers Dracul and Dark Ark, a great look back at Noah's Ark and the trouble that happened in those biblical days. Unbelievable stuff from Aftershock. Don't take my word for it. Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books, and how to order them through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Also dropping today on Word Balloon, and a great conversation with Hailey Kennedy. Now, Hailey is writing for the audio Orphan Black sequel That's called Orphan Black, The Next Chapter. It's at serialbox.com. It's a paid audio drama, but it's only $10, and it's 10 chapters, and they're long chapters. I mean, you're going to get a lot of entertainment out of this. This is like a great audiobook, and it is narrated by the great Tatiana Maslany. I hope I'm saying her name right, Tatiana, because I'm a gigantic fan. What an incredible performance in the television series Orphan Black to give such shades of difference between all the various clones of Sarah. And, man, I'll tell you, from Allison to, oh, God, what's her name now? Kissimmee, I believe. I don't have it in front of me, forgive me. But so many great characters and more new ones as well in this continuation of Orphan Black through Serial Box. Orphan Black, The Next Chapter. A great conversation. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. And just as much as you enjoyed the conversation with Rob right now. So 2 great new word balloons for you to enjoy throughout the weekend. Thanks a lot for listening. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.